She only needed him for 40 minutes. He ended up staying for the rest of his life. At the busiest terminal in the city, a billionaire holding his little girl's hand was stopped cold by a woman with shaking hands and desperate eyes. A complete stranger who had absolutely no right to ask what she was about to ask. She knew it. He knew it. And yet the words came out anyway, raw and terrified and completely honest. What happened in the next 40 minutes would unravel two carefully built lives and rebuild them into something neither of them ever thought they deserved. This is that story. Stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. The announcement for Flight 214 crackled through the overhead speakers of Hargrove International Airport at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon, competing with the noise of rolling luggage, crying toddlers, and a saxophone player stationed near the south entrance who had apparently decided that Tuesday was a perfectly good day to perform a jazz rendition of something nobody could quite identify. The terminal smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner, and the light coming through the massive glass panels on the east wall had that particular late afternoon quality. Yellow and a little tired, like it had been working since morning and wanted to go home. Everett Hawthorne noticed all of this the way he noticed most things, quietly, without making a production of it. He was standing at the edge of the seating area near Gate 7, one hand wrapped loosely around the handle of a leather carry-on that had seen better days, which was, if you knew anything about Everett Hawthorne, deeply ironic, given that the man could have purchased the entire terminal and the airline that used it without significantly impacting his morning. But Everett had never been the kind of person who replaced things just because he could afford to. The bag had belonged to his wife. He kept it. His other hand was holding the hand of a 5-year-old girl named Sophie. Sophie Hawthorne had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn mouth, and she was currently in the middle of a very serious negotiation about whether or not she was allowed to have a second bag of pretzels before dinner. The rule, Everett said without looking down, is one snack before a meal. But the pretzels are small, Sophie said. She said it with the absolute conviction of someone who had constructed a legally airtight argument. They're so small, Daddy. They're basically not even food. They're food. They're basically air. They're pretzels, Soph. She considered this for a moment. He could feel her thinking beside him, the small warm weight of her hand shifting in his as she regrouped. What if I eat them very slowly, she said carefully, so that by the time dinner comes they're already digested? Then it doesn't count. Everett looked down at her then. She was looking up at him with an expression of complete seriousness, dark hair escaping from the 2 uneven braids he'd attempted that morning. He still hadn't fully mastered braids, and Sophie had stopped correcting him because she said his face got too sad when he messed them up, which was a very 5-year-old kind of mercy. Where did you learn the word digested? He asked. Mrs. Patterson, she said. She said everything we eat gets digested and turns into energy. So if I eat the pretzels and they become energy, then energy isn't food, it's energy. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the small bag of pretzels, and handed it to her. Don't tell your grandmother, he said. Sophie took the bag with the solemn dignity of someone who had won a war. I won't tell anyone, she said graciously. This was, more or less, the emotional complexity of Everett Hawthorne's life these days. Pretzel negotiations, braid failures, business calls taken in bathroom stalls during school pickup because his assistant Marcus had learned to time the important ones for exactly the moments Everett least expected them. 3 days a week, he was in the office managing a global investment portfolio that several major financial publications had described, at various points, as quietly terrifying in its effectiveness. The other 4 days, he was trying to figure out how to make a 5-year-old eat something other than pretzels and pasta with butter. He had, by most measurable standards, built an extraordinary life. He had also, by the same standards, been profoundly alone for the past 4 years. He didn't think about that last part very much. He'd gotten good at not thinking about it. They'd been in Chicago for 3 days, deep. A board meeting that could have been a phone call, followed by 2 days that he'd structured around Sophie, taking her to the museum with the dinosaurs and the aquarium with the jellyfish that she described as like living lamps, which he thought was a better description than anything in the exhibit placard. Now they were heading home to New York, waiting for a boarding announcement that was already running 40 minutes late, and Everett was scanning the departures board with the calm patience of someone who had learned, after years of travel, that airports operated on their own time and arguing with them accomplished nothing. He was still looking at the board when someone ran directly into him, not a gentle bump. A full collision, shoulder to shoulder, hard enough that his carry-on handle slipped from his grip and his coffee, which he'd been holding loosely in his left hand, sloshed sideways and narrowly missed Sophie's head. "Sorry. I'm so sorry." The voice was breathless, already pulling back before he'd even turned around. I didn't see you. I'm sorry." He turned. The woman standing in front of him was approximately 30 years old, maybe a little younger, with dark blonde hair that had been pulled up into something that might have started the day as a neat bun and had since become a situation. She was wearing a white-collared shirt that had a coffee stain near the collar. Not his coffee, a previous coffee, which told him this had already been a difficult day before she'd run into him. She had a canvas bag over one shoulder that was so overstuffed it had given up closing, and she was breathing hard, like she'd been running, and her face was the face of someone in genuine crisis, not the mild panic of a missed flight, not the frustration of a delayed connection. Something worse than that. Her eyes were scanning the terminal behind him with the rapid, frantic movement of someone calculating a problem that had no good solution, and her hands, both of them, were clasped in front of her chest, like she was trying to physically hold herself together. "It's fine," Everett said. No damage." "Okay." She nodded, still not quite looking at him. "Okay, good. I'm sorry. She stopped. Her eyes finally landed on his face, and something shifted in her expression. She seemed to be doing the math on something, looking at him, then looking around the terminal, then looking back at him with an expression that he would later describe to Marcus as the most complicated thing he'd ever seen on a human face in under 3 seconds. "Can I ask you something insane?" she said. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "I know." She held up one hand. "I know how that sounds. I know you don't know me. I know. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to not walk away for like 30 seconds while I explain, because if you walk away, I'm going to have to figure out another option, and I don't have another option. I've been standing here for 10 minutes trying to find an option, and you are—" She stopped, took a breath, pressed her hands flat against her thighs like she was resetting. "You seem kind," she said, quieter now. "Your daughter has pretzel dust on her chin, and you didn't wipe it off because she looked happy, and you didn't want to interrupt that. That's a kind thing to notice. I need someone kind right now." Everett was quiet for a moment. He looked down at Sophie, who did indeed have pretzel dust on her chin, and who was now staring up at the woman with the open, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who had not yet learned that staring was impolite. "You're pretty," Sophie announced. The woman blinked. Then, despite everything, despite whatever was pulling her face into that tight, desperate expression, she let out a short, surprised sound that was almost a laugh. "Thank you," she said. "You have pretzel dust on your face." Sophie touched her own chin with great seriousness. "I know," she said. "It's on purpose." Everett looked back at the woman. 30 seconds, he said. "Talk." Her name, she told him, was Lily Carter. She'd been working the early shift at a restaurant 3 terminals over. She picked up extra shifts at the airport cafe when her schedule at her regular place allowed it. And she was supposed to be off an hour ago, but a coworker had called in sick and she'd stayed, and now her grandmother was landing in 20 minutes on a flight from Memphis, and her mother was already here, waiting at the arrivals area. And the problem was a lie. Not a small one. "I've been telling my grandmother that I'm married," Lily said. The words came out flat and fast, like she'd been rehearsing how to say them and had given up on making them sound good. "For 3 years. I told her I met someone and we got married and were very happy. I sent her a photo. It was a photo from a friend's wedding. I was a bridesmaid, and in one picture I was standing next to the groom's brother, and she saw it before I could explain, and she was so happy." Her jaw tightened. "My grandmother has not had an easy life. She raised me after my parents split up. She worked 60-hour weeks until she was 63 years old so that I could have. She just wanted me to be taken care of. She asked me about it every call, every birthday. So I said yes. I said, yes, we're happy. Things are wonderful. She stopped. Her eyes were bright but not crying. She was holding it back with what appeared to be significant effort. And then 6 months ago, she had a small heart episode. Nothing major. The doctor said she was fine, but she mentioned that the one thing she wanted before she got too old was to meet him. To meet my husband. Lily exhaled slowly. My mother knows the truth. My mother has been covering for me. But my grandmother is landing in 20 minutes and she's expecting a husband, Everett said. She's expecting a husband, Lily confirmed. She looked at him directly then, and there was something almost painful about how steady her gaze was. Like she'd decided that if she was going to humiliate herself, she was going to do it looking someone in the eye. I need someone to pretend to be my husband for 40 minutes, just until she gets settled, until she's through arrivals and into the car with my mother, and they're on their way to the hotel. 40 minutes. You don't have to say anything complicated. You just have to stand next to me and smile and not make her feel like her granddaughter has been lying to her face for 3 years. Everett looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Sophie, who was looking between the two of them with the alert attention of a child at a tennis match. Is this lady in trouble? Sophie asked him. It appears so, he said. Are you going to help her? He looked back at Lily. She was watching him with an expression that had moved past desperate and arrived somewhere quieter and more exhausted, like she'd already started preparing herself for the no, already started calculating what her next move would be, already started the process of accepting that this was a terrible idea and she should never have stopped him. She hadn't stopped being scared. She'd just gotten tired of hoping. He knew that feeling. He knew exactly what that felt like. What's your grandmother's name? He said. Lily blinked. What? If I'm going to be your husband for 40 minutes, I should know your grandmother's name. Her mouth opened, closed. Something crossed her face that she didn't seem to know how to handle. Dorothy, she said. Everyone calls her Dot. What does she know about me? About your husband? Lily's brain appeared to be catching up to the fact that he was actually doing this. His name is James. James, I said his last name was Carter, so she wouldn't have to remember a new name. He's an architect. He grew up in Connecticut. You don't have a specific job. I mean, you do. I told her you're an architect. But I didn't give her a lot of details about your work because I didn't know who you'd be. She doesn't know I have a daughter, he said. It wasn't accusatory, just a fact that needed addressing. Lily looked at Sophie. Her expression shifted into something that looked like genuine regret. No, she said. She doesn't. I'm sorry. I didn't plan this very well. Obviously, he said. Then before she could respond, Sophie is visiting a friend. She's not here today. You never mentioned her because it never came up. Lily stared at him. Yes, she said slowly. That works. He crouched down to Sophie's level. His daughter looked at him with her serious dark eyes, already understanding that this was a conversation that required her full attention. I need you to do something for me, he said. Is it a secret thing? She asked. It's a favor thing, he said. For the next little while, if anyone asks, you're a friend I ran into at the airport. You're not my daughter. Can you do that? Sophie thought about this with the gravity it deserved. Does the lady need help? She does. Okay, Sophie said. But I want a real dinner after, not airline food. Deal, he said. He stood back up. Lily was watching the two of them with an expression he couldn't entirely read. Something layered in it, something that had nothing to do with grandmothers or fake husbands or 40 minutes. You're going to do this, she said, less a question than a confirmation she was still trying to believe. I'm going to do this, he said, but we have about 15 minutes before her flight lands, which means we need to talk fast. Tell me everything real, what she looks like, what she laughs at, what she worries about, the stuff you didn't make up. Lily let out a long, unsteady breath. Then she started talking. Her name was Dorothy May Carter. She was 71 years old and she was small, 5'1" on a good day. With white hair she kept cut short and reading glasses she was always losing and finding in the exact place she'd left them. She had arthritis in her left hand that she never complained about, and a laugh that started low and then took over her whole body. She called everyone baby, including men she'd just met and people who were clearly older than her. She liked game shows and sweet tea, and had a genuine irrational hatred of cilantro that she brought up more often than the situation warranted. She had worked as a seamstress for 38 years, and even now, retired, she noticed the stitching on everything: hemlines, collars, the way a jacket sat on a person's shoulders. She had raised Lily from age 9 after Lily's parents had divorced in a way that was less a separation and more a detonation. Her father leaving for a woman he'd apparently been seeing for 2 years, her mother spiraling into a depression that lasted the better part of Lily's adolescence. Dot had stepped in without being asked, had moved Lily into her small house in Memphis without fanfare or complaint, had registered her for school and attended every parent-teacher conference, and never once made Lily feel like a burden, even when money was thin, even when Lily's mother was having a bad stretch and needed her own kind of care. She never asked for anything, Lily said. Her voice had dropped a little. Not once. I've sent her money when I can, and she always sends it back. She wants me to be okay. That's all she's ever wanted. They were walking now, moving through the terminal toward the arrivals area, Sophie trotting alongside Everett with her pretzel bag clutched to her chest. The saxophone player near the south entrance had transitioned into something slower. You said your mother knows the truth, Everett said. Is she going to be a problem? Lily made a sound that was not quite a laugh. My mother is always a problem, she said, but she loves Dot more than she loves being right, so she's been holding the line. She's going to be watching you very carefully. She's going to be waiting for you to slip up. What's her name? Patricia. She goes by Pat. She doesn't hug. She will shake your hand and make direct eye contact for slightly too long. And she's going to ask you at least one question that sounds innocent, but isn't. What kind of question? Lily hesitated. She asked my last fake boyfriend what his financial situation was within 4 minutes of meeting him. Am I your first fake husband? She looked at him sideways. You're my first fake anything, she said. I don't do things like this. I don't stop strangers in airports and ask them to. She shook her head. This is the most insane thing I've ever done. What made you stop me specifically? She was quiet for a moment. Honestly? Sophie, she said, I watched you for a few minutes before I worked up the nerve. You were arguing about pretzels with her, and you were actually listening to her argument, not just waiting for her to finish so you could say no. You were actually thinking about what she said. She paused. My grandmother listens to people that way. I thought if you listened to a 5-year-old about pretzels, you'd probably be decent to a 71-year-old woman who just wants to believe her granddaughter found someone good. Everett was quiet for a moment. For the record, he said, I'd already decided to give her the pretzels before she made her argument. The argument was just very good. Lily glanced at Sophie, who was now carefully examining the contents of her pretzel bag with scientific focus. She's incredible, she said. She is, he said. Don't tell her that. She's already negotiating from a position of enormous confidence. There was a moment, brief, barely there, where something eased between them. Not comfort exactly. Not yet. But the sharp edge of the panic softened slightly, and for the first time since she'd run into him, Lily's breathing settled into something closer to normal. They stopped near the arrivals barrier. Through the glass partition, they could see people beginning to emerge from the secured area. Travelers pulling wheeled suitcases, families gathering, a man holding a hand-lettered sign that said, Welcome home, Diane, with a drawing of a sun. She's going to ask how we met, Lily said quietly. Preparation mode again, that same rapid calculation. What have you told her before? That we met at a gallery opening, that you were there with a client and I was there with a friend, and you spilled wine on my dress and spent the rest of the night apologizing about it. Everett considered this. What kind of wine? Red, Pinot Noir. What was the dress? She looked at him. Blue, she said slowly. Why does that matter? Because if she asks your mother, and your mother has to confirm it, the details matter. Does your mother know the story? Yes? Good. He shifted the carry-on strap on his shoulder. What gallery? I made one up, the Holt Gallery. I said it was in Soho. There is a Holt Gallery in Soho, he said. It mostly shows contemporary photography. We could have plausibly been there for the same event. Lily stared at him. How do you know that? I've attended events there, he said simply, because that was the simplest true thing, and this didn't seem like the moment to explain the rest. She studied him for a beat longer than necessary. There was a question forming behind her eyes that she visibly decided to set aside. You're very calm about this, she said. One of us needs to be, he said. Sophie tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, she caught herself, looked at Lily, looked back at him. James, she said with great deliberateness, and it was so perfectly executed that he had to look away briefly to stop himself from smiling. Yes, he said. I need to go to the bathroom. Of course you do, he said. He looked at Lily. She was looking at Sophie with an expression that was doing several things at once: amusement, something softer underneath it, and the faintest shadow of something he might have called grief if he'd had more context for her life. I'll be right here, she said. I'll watch for them. He took Sophie to the family restroom 20 feet away, and while Sophie conducted her business with the editorial commentary she applied to all restroom experiences. This one smells like a candle, Daddy, a bad candle. Everett stood at the sink and looked at his reflection for a moment. He was doing this. He was in approximately 10 minutes going to walk out of this bathroom and pretend to be the husband of a woman he'd known for 19 minutes, in front of her grandmother and her suspicious mother, with his daughter pretending to be a stranger, in an airport, because a frightened woman with coffee on her shirt had said he seemed kind. He ran water over his hands, dried them slowly. He could leave. He could walk back out there, tell her he'd made a mistake, find a gentle way to extract himself from this situation before it got any more complicated. It was the reasonable choice. It was the safe choice. It was absolutely what any sane person would do. He'd been making the safe choice for 4 years. He turned off the tap. Ready? He asked Sophie. She hopped down from the step stool beside the sink. I'm always ready, she said. When they came back out, Lily was standing exactly where they'd left her. But something had changed in her posture. Her shoulders had gone rigid, and she was staring through the glass partition with the frozen look of someone who has seen what they were dreading. 2 women were coming through the arrivals gate. The first was a woman in her late 50s, tall, angular, with Lily's same dark blonde coloring and an expression that seemed calibrated to reveal nothing. She moved efficiently, pulling a rolling bag, already scanning the crowd. That was Patricia. That was Pat. The second woman was small. She was 5'1", maybe, with white hair and glasses hanging around her neck on a beaded chain and a pale yellow cardigan with a small embroidered flower on the collar. She was moving slowly, not because she was frail, but because she was looking at everything. The signs, the people, the ceiling, the way you look when a place is new to you and you don't want to miss any of it. She was smiling already before she'd even spotted Lily, because apparently Dorothy Carter was the kind of person who smiled at airports. Lily made a sound beside him, barely audible. Not quite a word. Hey, Everett said quietly. She turned to him. Her eyes were wet. It's going to be okay, he said. You don't know that, she said. No, he agreed, but I'm going to be really convincing. Something passed through her expression that he couldn't name. Then she exhaled, smoothed her shirt with one hand, and stepped forward. Grandma, she called out. Dorothy Carter looked up, and her whole face changed, opened up, lit from inside, the way faces do when they see the person they came to see. She walked faster, arms already coming up, and Lily crossed the distance between them in 3 quick steps and went into her grandmother's embrace with the particular quality of someone who hasn't been held properly in a very long time. Pat stopped beside Everett. She looked at him with her neutral, evaluating eyes. He looked back at her steadily because he had sat across boardroom tables from people who wanted to unnerve him, and Patricia Carter, whatever her capabilities, was not the most intimidating person he'd faced on a Tuesday afternoon. James, she said, not warmly, not coldly, a test. Pat, he said. And then, because something about her expression suggested that she'd expected him to say Mrs. Carter and would read the use of her first name carefully, he added, Lily talks about you. It's good to finally meet you. Pat's expression didn't shift, but she extended her hand and he shook it, and her handshake was firm and said several things about her character that he filed away. Dorothy was pulling back from Lily, both her small hands cupped around Lily's face, saying something too quiet for him to catch. Then she turned, following Lily's gaze, and saw him. Her smile, already considerable, got wider. She came toward him with her hands outstretched, and he did something then that he hadn't planned and didn't think about. He stepped forward to meet her, not waiting for her to cover all the distance because she was 71 and she had arthritis in her left hand and she had already traveled today, and some courtesies are instinct. "James," Dorothy said, taking both his hands in hers. Her grip was warm and sure. Finally, I get to put a face to you." "Dorothy," he said. And he was surprised to find that his voice came out warmly and without effort, because something about her face made it very easy to mean what he was saying. "I've been looking forward to this. Lily talks about you constantly." Dorothy laughed, the full-body laugh Lily had described, starting low, taking over. "She'd better," she said. "She knows I'll find out." She was still holding his hands, looking up at him with clear, sharp, delighted eyes. He understood immediately, with a certainty that settled somewhere in his chest, that this was not a woman who was easy to fool. "You're taller than I expected," she said. "Is that good or bad?" "Good," she said firmly. Her grandfather was tall. Tall men remember to bend down and listen. She tilted her head. "You have good hands. Strong, but not rough. You work with your head, not just your hands." "That's very perceptive, Bissell," he said. "I was a seamstress for 40 years, she said. "I notice things about people in the first 30 seconds. It's a blessing and a curse." She glanced at his left hand, at the absence of a ring, and he watched her notice it. "Neither of you are wearing your rings," she observed. Beside him, Lily went perfectly still. "We were at the airport," Everett said, without missing a beat. "I took mine off at security and put it in my pocket. I always forget to put it back." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. There was nothing there, obviously. He touched the pocket, made a mild face of self-deprecation, and then apparently left it in my carry-on. "That's exactly what he does," Lily said. Her voice was steady. "Every time." Dorothy looked between them. Then she laughed again. "Well," she said, releasing his hands and patting his arm with a fondness that had no business being as genuine feeling as it was, "at least you remember what it looks like on your finger, baby. Some men take it off on purpose." Pat, standing slightly apart, said nothing, but her eyes moved between Everett and Lily with the slow precision of someone keeping score. The next 30 minutes were the most concentrated exercise in collaborative improvisation that Everett had performed since a particular disaster of an investor presentation in 2019 that he still didn't entirely like to think about. Dorothy asked questions the way good conversationalists do, not in rapid succession, but woven into the natural rhythm of talking, so that answering felt like sharing rather than being interrogated. She asked how he'd known Lily was the one. He said, without planning to, that it was the way she argued, not to win, but because she actually believed what she was saying, and he'd grown up around people who argued to perform, and it turned out the real thing was harder to find than he'd expected. He felt Lily look at him from the corner of his eye and didn't turn. She asked about his work. He said architecture in a way that committed to nothing specific, and when Dorothy asked if he loved it, he said he loved the part where you had to see a thing that didn't exist yet and figure out how to make it real. Dorothy nodded at this like it was exactly the right answer. She asked about his family. He said his parents were gone, which was true, and that he had a small, close circle and had learned to value quality over volume in the people he kept near him. Dorothy looked at him for a moment after he said this. Something in her expression shifted slightly, recognizing something. "You've lost people," she said. Not a question. "Yes," he said. She nodded once. "The ones who've lost people know how to love differently," she said. "Not better, not worse, just with more attention. They know it isn't permanent." He didn't answer that. There wasn't anything to say. Sophie, who had been admirably conducting herself as a friendly stranger, sat beside Lily at the seating area and was telling Dorothy about the jellyfish at the aquarium with the particular passion she brought to things that had genuinely impressed her. Dorothy listened with complete attention, asking follow-up questions about whether jellyfish could feel things and whether Sophie thought they minded being in a tank. And Sophie said she thought they probably didn't mind because they didn't have brains. But she was going to look it up when she got home to make sure, which Dorothy said was exactly the right scientific approach. Lily was watching this exchange. She was sitting very still, and her expression had gone somewhere complicated. Something that looked like gratitude, and something else underneath it that sat there quiet and unexamined. At one point, Dorothy excused herself to the restroom with Pat, and for approximately 90 seconds, Everett and Lily were alone. She turned to him immediately. "How are you doing this?" she whispered. "What?" You sound like you actually mean it. All of it." He looked at her. "Most of it I do mean," he said. She stared at him. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "But what I said about the way you argue, I watched you explain this situation to me in 30 seconds in a crowded terminal, scared out of your mind, and you were honest about every part that made you look bad. That's not nothing." Lily looked away. Her jaw worked. "I owe you so much," she said quietly. "You owe me nothing," he said. "I chose this." "Why?" He thought about it. "Because your grandmother is exactly as wonderful as you said she was," he said, "and someone should get to spend 40 minutes making her happy." The look she gave him then, she seemed to be revising something. Revising him, possibly. Or revising whatever conclusion she'd been quietly drawing since the moment she'd stopped him at the gate. When Dorothy came back, she lowered herself into the seat beside Everett, with the slight care of someone managing an old injury, and she reached into her large canvas purse and produced something wrapped in a soft cloth. "I brought this from home," she said. "I've been carrying it for 2 months because I wasn't sure when I'd see you both together." She unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a bracelet, simple in construction, gold links, not heavy, worn to the particular smoothness of something old and frequently handled. Not expensive the way jewelry was expensive in showrooms. Expensive the way things were expensive when they were the only one. "This was my mother's," Dorothy said. She was looking at it with the particular expression people had when they looked at objects that held more than they could explain. She got it from her mother. It has been on the wrist of every woman in this family at her wedding, and at every moment that mattered after that. She looked up. At Lily first, then at Everett. "I couldn't be there when you married," she said to Lily. "I've carried that. I know we celebrated after, and I know it wasn't possible for me to travel then. But I wanted to give you this properly, in person, with him here to see it." Lily said nothing. She wasn't capable of saying anything. Dorothy reached for her granddaughter's wrist. She fastened the bracelet with slow, careful fingers. Then she held Lily's hand for a moment and looked at it. "There," she said softly. "That's where it belongs." Everett watched this. He was very still. The bracelet caught the late afternoon light from the terminal windows, that yellow, tired light that had been there when all of this began. It sat on Lily's wrist with the unargued authority of something that had always been meant to be exactly there. Lily was crying. She was doing it quietly, with her face turned slightly away, the way people cried when they were trying not to bother anyone with it. Pat was watching Everett. He met her eyes. Something passed across Pat's face, not warmth, not exactly, but the tactical expression softened by approximately 1 degree, as if she had been watching for the one thing that would reveal him, and instead had seen something she hadn't prepared for. He hadn't been performing for the last 30 seconds. He hadn't been performing at all. Dorothy patted Lily's hand and then looked at Everett with her clear, sharp eyes. "Take care of her," she said, simply, directly, without decoration. "She works too hard and she doesn't ask for help, and she thinks wanting things is selfish. That's my fault. I raised her too independent. Fix it." "I'll do my best," Everett said. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. "I know you will," she said. 40 minutes came and went. Pat guided Dorothy toward the exit, the hotel car already arranged and waiting. Dorothy hugged Lily for a long time at the door. She shook Everett's hand again. Both hands, the way she'd greeted him, holding on for a moment. "You're a good man," she told him, quietly, so only he could hear. "I can tell. I've been telling since about 4 minutes in." She released his hands. "Don't waste it. He watched them go through the sliding glass doors. Beside him, Lily stood with the bracelet on her wrist and said nothing for a very long time. Sophie drifted back from wherever she'd positioned herself and slipped her hand into Everett's without comment, because she was 5 years old and she understood that some moments didn't need words. Finally, Lily turned to him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," he said. "I have to give this back." She touched the bracelet. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. "I have to figure out how to give this back." He looked at the bracelet. He looked at her face. He thought about Dorothy saying, "I know you will," with those clear, two-seeing eyes. "One thing at a time," he said. Lily nodded. Then she looked down at Sophie, who was watching her with dark, patient eyes. "Your daughter," she said quietly, "is remarkable." "She is," Everett agreed. A pause. "So," Lily said. She wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand like she was embarrassed by them. "I guess you should probably get to your gate. You've already done so much more than—" "Our flight is delayed another hour," Sophie announced. She showed him the screen of his own phone, which she had apparently extracted from his jacket pocket while he wasn't paying attention. "It says right here, 1 hour. Everett stared at his daughter. Sophie looked back at him with absolute innocence. He looked at Lily. "Are you hungry?" he said. She blinked. "What?" "My daughter has strong opinions about not eating airline food, and we have an hour. There's a place on the other side of the terminal that looks reasonable." He paused. "If you're not, okay," she said. The word came out before she'd finished deciding it, like something that had been waiting. "Okay," he said. They walked through the terminal together, Lily with the bracelet on her wrist, Sophie between them finishing the last of her pretzels, the saxophone player near the south exit now playing something slow and almost pretty, and Everett with his hands loose at his sides and a careful, quiet feeling in his chest that he didn't entirely know what to do with, but decided, for now, not to examine too closely. The announcement board overhead listed their flight as delayed. He didn't mind. The restaurant on the other side of the terminal was called something forgettable, one of those airport chain places with laminated menus and overhead lighting designed to make everyone look slightly unwell. Sophie declared it not great but acceptable, which Everett thought was a fair assessment, and they found a booth in the corner near the window that looked out over the tarmac, where planes moved in the slow, deliberate way of large things that had somewhere important to be. Lily sat across from them. She set her canvas bag on the seat beside her and put both hands flat on the table, and for a moment she just sat there looking at them, at Everett, then at Sophie, then at the bracelet on her wrist, like she was trying to locate herself in a situation that had moved faster than she'd been able to track. "You okay?" Everett asked. "I don't know," she said. Honest, without apology. "I think I'm still somewhere in the middle of processing." "Take your time," he said. "We have 53 minutes. Sophie was studying the menu with the intensity she brought to all important decisions. "Do they have grilled cheese?" she asked. "They have a classic melt," Everett said. "Is that a grilled cheese?" "It appears to be a grilled cheese with a more expensive name." "Okay," Sophie said, satisfied, and set the menu down. Lily watched this exchange with something that wasn't quite a smile but was in the same neighborhood. The server came, young, distracted, wearing an expression that communicated she had 3 other tables and a complicated personal life, and they ordered coffee for Everett, tea for Lily, the classic melt for Sophie, and after a moment's consideration, a plate of sweet potato fries that Sophie indicated she would be willing to share under certain conditions. When the server left, the silence settled briefly between them. Not uncomfortable, just new. "Okay," Lily said. "Can I ask you something?" "You've already asked me something insane today," he said. "This can't be worse." "Why did you say yes?" she said. "I know I asked you that before and you said something kind, but really, you have a daughter with you. You had a flight to catch. You didn't know me. You had every reasonable excuse to say no, and it wouldn't even have been a cold thing to do because my problem was not your problem, and I had no right to ask." She was looking at him steadily. "So why?" Everett was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, a plane was being pushed back from its gate, the ground crew moving in practiced patterns. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. He didn't say it heavily, just placed it on the table the way you placed a fact. Her name was Claire. She had a heart condition that we knew about and managed and thought we had under control, and then one afternoon it wasn't under control anymore and she was gone. He paused. Sophie was 13 months old. Lily didn't say she was sorry. She just listened, which was the right call. After that, I did what you do. You keep moving because if you stop moving, you have to feel all of it. And there's a child who needs you to be functional, so you stay functional. He turned his coffee cup in a slow circle on the table. I got very good at saying no to things. No to events, no to setups, no to anything that felt unpredictable. I built a life that was manageable, controlled. And I told myself that was fine, that was enough. Sophie had everything she needed, and I had everything I needed, and that was what responsible people did. He stopped turning the cup. You looked at me in that terminal, and you were terrified, he said. And you asked me anyway, because someone you loved needed you to figure it out, even when you had no good options. And I thought... He stopped, made a slight sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I thought Claire would have done exactly what you did. She would have stopped the nearest decent-looking stranger and talked him into it in 45 seconds flat. She had no patience for giving up. Lily was looking at him with an expression that had gone very quiet. She sounds extraordinary, she said. She was a lot, he said, in the best way. Sophie, who had been following this conversation with the radar children had for important things, reached over and put her small hand on top of Everett's without looking up from the placemat she'd been drawing on with a borrowed pen. Just rested it there for a second and then went back to drawing. Everett looked down at her hand, then away. How long have you been pretending? He asked Lily. She exhaled. 3 years, she said, but the original lie started as one small thing. I was on the phone with Dot, and she was asking about my life, and I could hear in her voice that she was worried. She's always worried about me being alone, and I said I'd met someone. I said it before I'd thought about it, and she was so... Lily shook her head. She made this sound like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally got to let it out. And I thought, okay, I'll date someone in real life, and then this lie will fix itself. But it didn't. I dated someone for about 8 months. Marcus. She paused. Not a good situation. When it ended, I couldn't bring myself to tell her, so I just kept going. Said we were doing well. Said he was busy. And by the time I understood how far it had gone, it felt like the truth was going to hurt her so much more than the lie. She turned the bracelet on her wrist with one finger, not quite looking at it. I know how that sounds. It sounds like someone who loves their grandmother more than they care about looking good, he said. Or someone who was a coward, she said flatly. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, he said. Most cowardice comes from love. It's just love that's scared. She looked at him. That's either very wise or a very generous interpretation. Maybe both, he said. The food arrived. Sophie applied herself to the classic melt with the focus of someone who had earned it. The sweet potato fries were established as a shared resource, terms to be renegotiated on a fry-by-fry basis. Lily wrapped both hands around her tea and seemed to slowly, incrementally, release some tension she'd been carrying in her shoulders since the terminal. Can I ask you something now? Everett said. Fair, she said. What do you actually do? Not for the airport cafe, the other place. I'm a waitress, she said. Without apology, without the slight defensive lift some people put on statements about service work when they thought the other person might be judging them. Just, that's what I do. At a place called Arlo's in Midtown. Lunch and dinner, 5 days a week. It's a good restaurant. Solid tips, decent management, reasonable hours. She paused. I moved to New York 6 years ago. I had this idea about going to culinary school. I'd been cooking since I was a kid, Dot taught me. It was the thing we did together. But school costs what school costs, and I needed to work, and the plan kept getting pushed back. She looked at her tea. It's still pushed back. You want to cook? He said. Not a question. I want to have a restaurant, she said. It came out quietly, like she didn't say it out loud very often. Something small, the kind of place where the menu changes based on what's good that week. Southern food, because that's what I know, but with, I don't know, room to be interesting. She stopped. That sounds extremely vague. It doesn't, he said. It sounds like you know exactly what you want and you've gotten used to not saying it. She looked at him for a moment. You do that a lot, she said. What? Say the thing I was trying not to think about. The flight announcement board visible from their table refreshed. New York, JFK, still showing delayed. Sophie had finished the melt and was now conducting what appeared to be a small architectural project with the remaining fries. What happens with your grandmother? Everett said. Long term. You can't maintain this. Lily's expression did something complicated. I know, she said. I've known for a long time. I just haven't figured out the right way to... She stopped. How do you tell someone who gave up everything for you that you've been lying to their face for 3 years because you couldn't figure out how to handle their disappointment? You tell them exactly that, he said. That's simple. That's not simple at all, he said. It's the hardest thing. I didn't say simple. I said, that's how you do it. She was quiet for a moment, turning her teacup slowly. She knew, Lily said. Didn't she? He didn't answer right away. What do you think? I think, Lily said slowly, that a woman who notices stitching in the first 30 seconds and announces she's been reading people for 40 years did not fail to notice that her granddaughter produced a stranger at an airport and called him her husband. She paused. I think she knew and she let it happen anyway. Why would she do that? Lily looked down at the bracelet. Because she still wanted me to have it, she said softly. Because it didn't matter how I got there. She still wanted me to have the real thing eventually. Her voice caught slightly on the last word. That's such a Dot thing to do. Everett watched her. There was a version of this moment where he said nothing, where he let it sit, where he finished his coffee, and they exchanged numbers for the purpose of figuring out the bracelet situation and said goodbye at the gate, and that was the end of it. A contained story. A complete one, in its way. He chose not to say nothing. Give me your phone, Soon, he said. She looked up. What? Your phone. I want to put my number in it. She stared at him for a second like she was waiting for the explanation, and when none came, she reached into her bag and handed it over. He typed his name, just Everett, no last name, and his number, and handed it back. Why? She asked. Because you're going to have to figure out what to do about the bracelet, he said, and that's a real conversation that shouldn't happen over text with a stranger. And because, he paused, considered how to say the next part without making it something it wasn't yet. You're one of the more interesting people I've talked to in a while, and I don't talk to enough interesting people. She looked at the phone, then at him. I'm a waitress from Memphis who just conned her grandmother in an airport, she said. Yes, he said, and in the last hour you've been funnier and more honest and more genuinely yourself than most people I spend significant time with. So, he picked up his coffee. The number's there. She held the phone for another moment. Then she set it down and looked at him with an expression that was trying to be skeptical and not quite making it. You're a strange person, she said. Probably, he agreed. Sophie looked up from her fry architecture. He's also very nice, she offered, even though he pretends he's not. I'm perfectly nice, Everett said. You told Marcus the projections were theoretically defensible, Sophie said. He stared at his daughter. Where did you hear that? You were on the phone in the car and I wasn't asleep, she said serenely. You were supposed to be asleep. I was thinking about jellyfish, she said. It kept me up. Lily was watching Sophie with an expression of barely suppressed delight. She's going to be absolutely unstoppable, she said. I'm aware, Everett said, with the tone of a man who had accepted this and was still adjusting. The flight announcement came at 5:42. Boarding in 15 minutes, Gate 7, final call for zones 1 through 3. Sophie was already gathering her things with practiced efficiency, and Everett settled the check over Lily's objection, a brief and slightly comedic exchange in which she tried to calculate her share, and he informed the server before she could get the math finished. That was rude, she told him. It was efficient, he said. I don't need you to pay for my tea. I know, he said. I also know you've been working double shifts and you stayed late today for someone else's problem, and you've had about the most stressful afternoon possible. Let me buy the tea. She opened her mouth, closed it. Fine, she said. The tea, not the fries. I'm counting the fries as Sophie's. The fries are absolutely Sophie's. Hey, Sophie said. You ate 14 of them, Everett said. I was sharing them with myself, Sophie said. They walked back through the terminal together, slower now than the panicked sprint of 2 hours ago, the crisis having resolved into something strange and new that none of them had a name for yet. The saxophone player was gone, replaced by recorded music piped through the overhead speakers. Something instrumental, vaguely familiar, the kind of music airports played to create the impression of calm. At the junction where their paths split, Lily's exit to the subway, Everett's gate to the right, they stopped. Sophie had fallen into the comfortable silence of a tired child who was processing a lot of things and had decided to process them internally. She was holding Everett's hand and examining the departures board with mild interest. Lily stood with her canvas bag and her bracelet and her complicated afternoon and looked at Everett with an expression that was trying to figure out what the right thing to say at the end of this was. I don't know how to categorize today, she said finally. You don't have to, he said. I stopped a stranger and asked him to lie to my grandmother, and he did it so well that my grandmother gave him a 100-year-old bracelet, she said. I don't have a category for that. File it under stranger things have happened, he said. Or don't. It doesn't need a category. She laughed at that. A real laugh, not the near laugh from the terminal, and it changed her face the way real laughter always did, made her look briefly, completely like herself. Okay, she said. Stranger things have happened. She looked down at Sophie. It was very nice to meet you, she said. You have excellent negotiating skills, and I think you're going to be spectacular. Sophie considered this with appropriate gravity. I know, she said. Thank you for letting me sit with you. Thank you for letting me borrow your dad. Sophie looked up at Everett, back at Lily. He was good at it, she said sagely. The husband thing. He's very convincing when he's being nice. He doesn't always do it for people. The silence after that was approximately 2 seconds long and felt longer. Good to know, Lily said carefully, not looking at Everett. He was not looking at her either. He was looking at the departures board with the focused attention of a man who had found something very interesting about gate assignments. You'll text me, he said. Not quite a question. About the bracelet, she said. About the bracelet, he confirmed. A pause. Or whenever, he said. And then, apparently feeling that this required clarification. If you have a question about jellyfish for scientific purposes, Sophie can help. Sophie nodded seriously. I'm going to research them tonight, she confirmed. Lily bit her lower lip. Okay, she said, or if I have jellyfish questions. Good. Good. She shifted her bag on her shoulder, looked at him once more, that considering look, like she was adding something to an ongoing calculation. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, the bracelet catching the light for just a second as she raised her hand in a brief wave without looking back. Everett watched her go until the crowd folded around her. Sophie tugged his hand. Gate 7, she said. I know, he said. She's nice, Sophie said. She is, he said. They walked toward the gate. Sophie maintained a diplomatic silence for approximately 40 seconds, which was close to her record. Are you going to call her? She asked. She's going to text me about the bracelet, he said. That's not what I asked. He looked down at her. She looked up at him with her mother's stubborn mouth and her own particular brand of patience. I don't know, he said. That's more honest, she said approvingly, and went back to watching the planes. The flight home was quiet. Sophie fell asleep somewhere over Pennsylvania with her head against his arm. Her small weight settled into him the way she always slept on planes. Completely. Without reservation. The way children trusted before they learned not to. He kept the window shade up and watched the dark landscape below, the scattered constellations of city lights and highway lines. His phone was in his jacket pocket. He didn't take it out. He thought about Dorothy's hands holding his. The way she'd said, I know you will, with no hesitation, no qualifier, just that flat and steady certainty. He thought about Lily crying quietly, with her face turned away, trying not to take up space with it. He thought about the bracelet in the late afternoon light. He thought about what it meant that 40 minutes had felt somehow more real than most of the past 4 years. He didn't think about that last part for long. He filed it in the same category he filed a lot of things. The category with no label, the one he returned things to when he didn't know what else to do with them. Sophie shifted in her sleep. He adjusted his arm slightly so she wouldn't slide. The plane dropped through a pocket of turbulence and steadied itself. The lights below continued their slow, illuminated drift. He was home by 9:30. Marcus had sent 4 messages, all work-related, all technically urgent, all things that could wait until morning. He made Sophie a grilled cheese that was objectively better than the classic melt from the terminal, which she ate approximately 1/3 of before falling asleep at the kitchen table. He carried her to bed, pulled the blanket up, sat on the edge of her mattress for a moment in the dark. The apartment was quiet in the specific way it was always quiet after Sophie was asleep. Present, full of her, but hushed. He went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stood at the window that looked out over the street, which was busy at this hour, with the particular evening energy of a city that didn't wind down, just changed registers. His phone was on the counter. He hadn't texted. He wouldn't tonight. That seemed like the right call. She had enough to process without a text from him landing in the middle of whatever she was working through. He finished the water, turned off the kitchen light. At 11:47 p.m., his phone lit up on the counter. He was already in the hallway, almost to his room, and he turned back. The text was from an unsaved number that was nonetheless immediately recognizable. It said, "I got home." The subway was actually on time, which seems statistically improbable. I'm standing in my kitchen looking at this bracelet, and I still don't entirely know what happened today. I think that's okay, though. Lily. He read it twice. He typed, "It was a strange day, the good kind, I think. Get some sleep." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "You too," and "Thank you, for real. I know saying it again doesn't make it bigger, but I don't have a better word." He thought for a moment, then typed, "Dorothy said don't waste good things. I think that applies to saying thank you too. You're welcome. Good night, Lily." The dots appeared, disappeared. Then, "Good night, Everett." He set the phone down, stood in the hallway for a moment in the dark, then he went to bed. The next 3 days were ordinary. He worked. He took Sophie to school and picked her up. He ate lunch at his desk on Tuesday and remembered, briefly, the sweet potato fries. He did not text. Neither did she, which he thought was the right rhythm, both of them giving the day space to be what it was without immediately forcing it into something new. On Thursday morning, at 8:47, his phone lit up while he was reading the overnight market reports. "Hi. Random question. If you wanted to return something to someone you'd never expect to be returning something to, how far in advance would you want them to ask?" He put down the market report. "Context," he typed. "I need to return the bracelet to Dot in person. It doesn't feel right to mail it, but that means I have to go to Memphis. And I was thinking, this is the insane part, that maybe it would be easier if I didn't go alone." He read this 3 times. "Why me?" he typed. Not unkindly, just directly. "Because you've already met her, and because she likes you, and because if I show up alone and try to explain this whole thing, she's going to worry about me. But if I show up with you and we tell her the truth together, she'll have more to hold on to than just the fact that I lied." A pause. Then, "Also, I think you'd probably be honest with her in a way I'm finding it hard to be, because you don't have 40 years of trying not to disappoint her in the way." He sat with this for a moment. The market report glowed on his other screen, patient and indifferent. "When are you thinking?" he typed. "I have a weekend off in 3 weeks. Last weekend of the month." He pulled up his calendar. The last weekend of the month had a standing dinner he could reschedule and nothing else. Sophie would be with her aunt for that weekend, an arrangement they'd had since Sophie was 2, a monthly thing that worked. He looked at the calendar for a long moment. "I'll check my schedule," he typed. "Give me until tomorrow." "Okay," she wrote. Then, "I know this is a lot to ask. You already asked me something a lot bigger in an airport," he typed. "This is smaller." "Huh." A pause. "Is it, though?" He thought about that. "Maybe not," he wrote back. He set the phone down. Outside his office window, the city was doing what it did, indifferent and enormous and full of its own momentum. He looked at it for a moment, this view he'd had for 6 years, familiar as furniture. He picked the phone back up. "I'll go with you," he typed. "Figure out the details and let me know." The dots appeared. "Thank you," she wrote. And then, after a second, for someone who gives off a very "I have systems and I don't disrupt them" energy, you keep doing things that don't fit the system. He considered this. "I had systems," he wrote. "They were very good systems. Apparently they have a flaw." What's the flaw? He looked at the market report, at the calendar, at the city out the window, at the small square of his phone screen with her name at the top. "I'll let you know when I figure it out," he typed. She sent back a single punctuation mark, a period, which somehow managed to communicate that she found this both frustrating and acceptable, which was a lot for one period to carry, but she pulled it off. He put the phone in his pocket. The market report was still there, waiting. He read 3 lines of it, then stopped, put it aside. For the first time in a while, he had something he needed to think about that had nothing to do with investments, and he gave it the time it deserved. 3 weeks away. Memphis. A bracelet and a truth, and a 71-year-old woman with clear, sharp eyes who had said, "I know you will," without any hesitation. He didn't know what any of it meant yet. He wasn't sure it was supposed to be clear yet. But he'd said yes. And somewhere across the city, in a midtown apartment, or on a lunch break in a restaurant kitchen, or on a subway platform, a woman named Lily Carter was looking at a bracelet on her wrist and figuring out how to say the hardest true thing she'd ever had to say. He thought about her saying, "I think that's okay, though," in the text last night. The way she'd reached for okay, even when she wasn't sure of it. That, he thought, was a person worth knowing. That quality right there, the reaching for okay when you weren't certain of it, the willingness to go toward the hard thing even when you were scared. That was not a common thing. He knew it because he used to have it, before loss had taught him to be careful. He wasn't sure what it meant that being around it again, even briefly, even in the strange, compressed context of an airport afternoon, had made something in him feel less settled than it had in years. Less settled, and somehow less heavy. He opened the market report again. Read 6 more lines, set it down. Outside, the city continued its business, enormous and indifferent, which was fine. He had plenty of time to be indifferent later. For now, he let himself sit with the thing that had no name yet, in the quiet of his office, with the phone in his pocket, and 3 weeks on the calendar, and a question he hadn't finished forming. It was a Thursday morning in New York. It was already a different kind of Thursday than the last several hundred had been. The 3 weeks between the airport and Memphis were not supposed to change anything. That was the logic Everett applied to them. They were a logistical interval, a period of scheduling and coordination, not a period of significance. He had agreed to help someone with a difficult conversation. That was the whole of it. He was good at difficult conversations. He would fly to Memphis, sit in a room with a 71-year-old woman, help Lily say what needed to be said, and come home. Clean. Contained. That was the logic. What actually happened was that he and Lily texted every day for 3 weeks, and by the end of it, he knew things about her that had no relevance to Memphis whatsoever. It started practically. She texted to confirm the date. He responded with his flight information. She said she'd meet him at the airport. Logistics. Then she texted a follow-up question about whether Dorothy would likely be more upset about the deception itself or the duration of it, and he said he thought Dorothy had probably already forgiven the deception and was waiting to see if Lily trusted her enough to come clean, which was a different kind of hurt entirely. That text took her 20 minutes to respond to, and when she did, she wrote only, "That's probably exactly right, and I hate that you can see it so clearly from the outside." After that, the text stopped being about logistics. She texted him on a Tuesday night from the restaurant, a photo of a dish she'd been watching the head chef prepare, a short rib with something underneath it that she said was a sweet potato puree with smoked butter, and she'd been thinking about putting something like it on a menu someday if she ever had a menu to put things on. He wrote back asking what she'd do differently, and she sent a paragraph about the balance of sweetness and how she thought a little acid somewhere, maybe a pickled onion situation, would cut through the richness and give it somewhere to go. He read the paragraph twice and wrote back, "You already have the menu in your head. You've had it for years." She didn't respond for a while after that, and when she did, it was just, "Don't say things like that. It makes it harder." He understood what she meant. He just wasn't sure it was the wrong kind of harder. On a Wednesday evening, he was putting Sophie to bed, and Sophie asked, with the precision that children reserve for the questions they'd been thinking about all day, whether Lily was his girlfriend. "No," he said. "But you text her every day," Sophie said. "How do you know that?" "Because every time your phone lights up at dinner, you look at it like it might be important, and then you look like it was," she said. "And you don't do that with Marcus." "Marcus is my assistant," Everett said. "The texts are never good news." "So Lily's texts are good news," Sophie said, with the satisfaction of someone closing a logical loop. He looked at his daughter, who was under her blanket with her stuffed rabbit and an expression of patient inquiry. "We're friends," he said. "You don't have friends," Sophie said, not cruelly, just accurately. "I have friends." "You have Marcus and Uncle David and the people from work," she said. "Those aren't friends. Those are colleagues. Friends are different. Friends are people you want to call even when nothing's wrong." "Where did you hear that?" "Mrs. Patterson," she said. "She said that's the difference between acquaintances and friends. When nothing's wrong and you still want to talk to them." He sat with this for a moment. "Get some sleep," he said. "That means I'm right," Sophie said. "It means I don't know yet," he said, which is the honest answer. She accepted this. "Okay," she said. "Tell her I say hi." "Go to sleep, Soph." He texted Lily that night. Sophie says hi. She responded 7 minutes later. "Tell her the jellyfish research she recommended was extremely compelling. Also, I had a dream about a stingray last week, which I think is related." He smiled at his phone alone in his kitchen. Then he put the phone down because smiling alone at a phone at 10:30 at night was the kind of thing a person should at least notice themselves doing. He noticed it. He wasn't entirely sure what to do about it. The Friday they flew to Memphis was overcast, the sky low and gray in the way of late autumn, and Everett arrived at LaGuardia to find Lily already at the gate with 2 cups of coffee, one of which she handed to him without asking how he took it, which would have been presumptuous if she hadn't already learned from 3 weeks of texts exactly how he took it. "Oat milk, no sugar," she said. "Tell me I got it right." He took the cup, sipped it. "You got it right." "I've been practicing the coffee at work," she said. "In preparation." "You practiced my coffee order." "I prepared for the logistics of this trip," she said, and sat down. She looked different than she had at the airport 3 weeks ago, though the difference was subtle enough that he couldn't immediately name it. She'd slept, probably. The desperate edge was gone from her posture, replaced with a different kind of tension, quieter, more deliberate. She was wearing dark jeans and a dark green top, and her hair was down, which he hadn't seen before, and she had the bracelet on her wrist. He noticed that last part, and then told himself he'd noticed it and moved on. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I'm going to do something very hard and also extremely right," she said, which is an uncomfortable combination. "It usually is." She wrapped both hands around her coffee. "Thank you for doing this," she said. "I know I've said it 100 times. You've said it 4 times, he said. "I've been counting." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because the 4th time you said it differently than the other 3. The other 3 sounded like obligation. The 4th one sounded like you actually believed I didn't mind." She stared at him for a moment. "You do that thing," she said. "What thing?" "The thing where you say something that makes me feel like I've been walking around with a sign on my back and you're the only one who bothered to read it." He was quiet for a second. "That's not the worst thing to be," he said. She looked away. At the gate, at the runway through the large windows, at the gray sky. "No," she said softly. "I guess it isn't." They flew to Memphis side by side, shoulders occasionally touching as the plane adjusted its route through light turbulence, and they talked the way they'd been talking for 3 weeks, in the easy, ranging way of people who had started talking for one reason and kept going for another. She told him about a table she'd had the night before, a couple celebrating an anniversary who'd sent back a wine and then apologized so profusely for sending it back that she'd felt worse for them than for herself. He told her about a meeting he'd had Wednesday with a company he'd been considering investing in, where the CEO had been so focused on impressing him that he'd failed to notice one of his own executives disagreeing with everything he said via increasingly pained facial expressions. I passed on the investment, he said. You can't build a good company if you can't read the room. Was the executive making the faces wrong? Lily asked. Absolutely not, he said. That's why I passed. She laughed. The turbulence came and went, and the plane leveled out somewhere over the Appalachian foothills, and Lily looked out the window at the cloud cover below and said, What was she like? Claire? The question landed quietly. He could see from the way she'd said it that she'd been considering it for a while. Not impulsive, not casual. She was chaotic, he said. Not sadly, just accurately. In the best sense. She had 17 things going at once and somehow kept track of all of them. She was a landscape architect. She designed public parks, green spaces. She had this thing where she could look at a completely empty lot and immediately see what it should become, like the space told her. He paused. She was also stubborn past the point of reason, completely incapable of letting things go. And she had a laugh that you could hear from 2 rooms over, which was great at parties and less great at 6 in the morning. Lily smiled at that. She sounds very alive, she said. She was, he said. Every version of alive. The inconvenient ones, too. He turned his cup in his hands. Sophie has her mouth. The same set to the jaw when she's made a decision. It catches me sometimes. In a good way or both, he said. Mostly good. Sometimes it just hits unexpectedly. Lily nodded. She didn't try to comfort him, which was the right call. She just let it be what it was. What made you trust me? She asked after a moment. At the airport. You didn't know me. I could have been anyone. He considered this. You were a terrible liar, he said. She blinked. Excuse me? About everything except the grandmother story, he said. About that you were completely clear, but when you were trying to seem less desperate than you were obvious. People who are actually dangerous don't let you see the terrified part. You were all terrified part. That's a very strange thing to find reassuring, she said. Maybe, he said, but it worked. Dorothy lived in a small white house in a quiet part of East Memphis, a neighborhood of old trees and modest yards and porches with chairs on them that looked like they were actually used. Lily had rented a car at the airport, and she drove with the focused silence of someone navigating a familiar road and an unfamiliar feeling simultaneously. The house had a porch light on even in the afternoon. The front garden was tidy, with the particular tidiness of someone who moved more slowly than they used to, but still cared about the standard. A ceramic pot of late-season mums sat by the front step, orange and slightly past their best. Lily sat in the parked car for a moment. Okay, she said. Take your time, he said. If I take time, I'll talk myself out of it, she said. I've been talking myself out of it for 3 years. That's how I got here. She put her hand on the door handle and stopped. What if she's actually hurt? Not the graceful Dot version I'm imagining, but actually genuinely hurt. What if I've broken something? Everett looked at the house, at the mums, at the porch light on in the gray afternoon. Then you deal with it, he said, together. You've been trying to protect her from being hurt, but what she doesn't have right now is the choice to forgive you. You need to give her that. Lily was quiet. You're giving her a chance to love you through the real thing, he said. Not the version of you that has everything together, the actual version. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright, and she was holding everything very still. Do you know how long it's been since someone knew the actual version? She said. Her voice was low and even, but something in it was unsteady underneath. He held her gaze. I know, he said. She held it for one more second. Then she opened the car door. Dorothy answered before they'd finished climbing the porch steps, which meant she'd been watching for them, which meant she'd been waiting for longer than just today. She was wearing a soft blue house dress, and her glasses were, characteristically, not on her face, and she looked at Lily first with an expression of full and uncomplicated love, and then she looked at Everett, and something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, exactly. Recognition. Both of you, she said. Good. Come in. The inside of the house was exactly what Everett would have predicted and couldn't have described in advance. Small rooms, warm in color, every surface holding something that had a story. Photographs in mismatched frames, a shelf of ceramic figurines, a quilt folded over the arm of the couch in the particular way quilts were folded when they were used and loved, and not just decorative. The whole place smelled of something baking, faint and sweet, which Dorothy acknowledged with a slight wave toward the kitchen. "Sweet potato pie," she said. "I started it this morning. Didn't know when you were coming, but I knew you were coming." She said this without drama, like it was simply a fact she'd been operating with for a while. Lily's breath caught slightly. "Dot, sit down, baby," Dorothy said, not unkindly. "Let me get tea and then we'll talk." She disappeared into the kitchen. Lily and Everett sat on the couch, not close together, not performing anything, just two people on a couch in a small house in Memphis about to do something hard. Lily was looking at her hands. She'd taken the bracelet off on the drive over and it was in the front pocket of her jacket, a small weight she kept touching without quite reaching for. Everett looked around the room. On the shelf nearest to him there was a photograph. A young woman with dark blonde hair, maybe 19 or 20, laughing at something off camera. The likeness to Lily was immediate and absolute. Dorothy came back with 3 cups of tea on a small tray, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone managing bad knees, who refused to let the bad knees make decisions for her. She set the tray down, settled herself into the armchair across from them, arranged her cup, and looked at Lily with clear, patient eyes. "Talk," she said. Lily looked at her hands, then at Dorothy. "I need to tell you the truth about something," she said. "And I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything, because if you say anything kind in the middle, I'm going to fall apart and I won't finish." Dorothy raised her teacup. "I'm listening," she said. Lily told her everything. She told it the same way she'd told Everett at the airport. Fast, direct, not softening the parts that made her look bad. She went back further than the airport, back to the original phone call, back to the photograph that started it, back through 3 years of carefully constructed reports of a life she didn't have. Her voice was steady for the first half and less steady for the second, and she stopped twice, both times pressing her lips together and waiting until she could continue. And both times Dorothy sat with her hands in her lap and her face still and open and didn't say anything, because Lily had asked her not to. "He's not my husband," Lily said at the end. "He never was. I stopped him in the airport because I was terrified and I didn't have a plan, and he was kind enough to do something extraordinary for a complete stranger, because that's apparently the kind of person he is." She stopped. "The bracelet." She reached into her pocket and set it on the coffee table between them. "I should have given this back immediately. I know that. I didn't because I didn't know how to start explaining why I needed to give it back." She looked at it sitting there on the table. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I kept lying. I was scared of disappointing you, and I made it so much worse." Silence. Dorothy looked at the bracelet on the table. She looked at Lily. She looked at Everett, briefly, with those clear, sharp eyes that saw too much, and then back at Lily. "Are you finished?" she said. "Yes," Lily said. Dorothy picked up her tea, took a slow sip, set it down. "I knew," she said. The words landed simply, not vindictively, just placed there, the way Everett placed facts. Lily stared at her. "What?" "Not about all of it," Dorothy said. "Not the whole shape of it until the airport. But I've known for a while that something wasn't sitting right." She folded her hands in her lap. "You're a bad liar, Lily Marie. You always have been. When you were 11 and you broke my blue vase trying to reach the top shelf, you told me it fell on its own, and your left eye did a thing it always does when you're not telling the truth. It still does that thing." Lily made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "At the airport," Dorothy continued, "when you introduced him, I could see that you were terrified. Not nervous to meet someone terrified. Terrified. I've done something wrong, terrified. Those are different." She glanced at Everett, and I could see that he was someone who had agreed to something without enough information and was doing his level best to make it work. She paused. "He was very good. I'll give him that." "He was extraordinary," Lily said quietly. He was, Dorothy agreed without any particular ceremony. That was also part of why I gave you the bracelet, not because I believed the marriage, because I believed him. She looked at Everett directly. I have met a lot of men in 71 years. I know the difference between a man who is being kind because it costs him nothing and a man who is being kind because he decided to be. You decided. She tilted her head. Why? His wife, Lily said softly. She was... Everett lost his wife, Sophie's mother. He said, tell her what you said about Claire. He hadn't expected to be included in this moment, and for a second it caught him. I said Lily reminded me of her, he said, the way she went toward the hard thing even when she was scared. He paused. Claire didn't give up on things either. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. How old is your little girl? She said. 5, he said. Almost 6. Dorothy nodded slowly, like something was settling into place for her. She was wonderful, she said. At the airport. Very serious child. Smart. She argued me into a second bag of pretzels using metabolic theory, he said. Dorothy laughed. The full body laugh Lily had described, starting low, taking over the room. Lily let out a long, unsteady breath beside him, and Everett felt the tension in the room shift, not disappear but change key, become something less sharp. Dorothy reached over and picked up the bracelet from the coffee table. She held it for a moment, turning it in her fingers with the careful attention she gave to things she'd handled for years. My mother gave me this when I married, she said. She said every woman in this family carries love differently. Some loud, some quiet, some in ways that look like other things entirely. She said the bracelet isn't about being perfect. It's about being present for the real thing when it comes. She looked at Lily. You were trying to protect me. It was wrong, and it went too far. And we're going to have a conversation about trust that is not going to be comfortable. She paused. But I know why you did it. I know exactly why. Lily had stopped trying to hold it together. She was crying quietly, in that particular way she had, with her face half turned, like she was embarrassed by her own emotions, and also past the point of controlling them. Come here, Dorothy said. Lily crossed the space between them and folded into her grandmother's arms, and Dorothy held her the way she'd held her at the airport, with the complete and unreserved certainty of someone for whom loving this person was simply what they did. Everett sat quietly on the couch. He was, by any measure, completely surplus to this moment, which was fine. He looked at the photographs on the shelf. The young laughing woman. A family portrait from many years back. A photo of Lily at what looked like high school graduation, wearing a cap and a slightly pained smile in the way of 17-year-olds who found their own ceremonies embarrassing. Dorothy said something quietly into Lily's hair. Lily shook her head. Dorothy said it again. After a while, Lily pulled back. She wiped her face with both hands, took a breath. Dorothy still had the bracelet. She looked at it, and then she looked at Everett, and then she looked back at Lily. Tell me about him, Dorothy said. The real version. Not the James from Connecticut who is an architect. This man. She gestured toward Everett with a directness that he found almost funny. Lily looked at him. He looked back. This had not been the plan. She stopped, considered. He's one of the most honest people I've met, which is ironic given that I met him by asking him to lie. He has a daughter who is going to be president someday, and he's raising her by himself, and somehow she's turning out extraordinary. She paused. He knows things about me that nobody else knows, and I don't know how that happened over text messages, but it did. And I asked him to come here with me because I couldn't imagine doing this without him. And I'm not sure what that means yet, but I think it might mean something. She said all of this looking at Dorothy, not at Everett. He was glad she wasn't looking at him because he didn't know what his face was doing. Dorothy nodded slowly. What does he do? She said. For work, not the architect. He's in finance, Lily said. Investments. She glanced at him. He's private about the specifics. Dorothy looked at Everett with her penetrating, even gaze. Are you good at it? She said. Yes, he said. He figured this was not the moment for false modesty. Are you good to her? She said. I'm trying to be, he said. We're figuring out what this is. Don't take too long, Dorothy said. Figuring out takes as long as you let it. I've seen people figure for 20 years and miss the whole thing. She turned the bracelet in her hands one more time. Then she held it out across the coffee table. Lily looked at it. Dot, I can't. I didn't give it to James from Connecticut, Dorothy said firmly. I gave it to the woman sitting in front of me, and I gave it because I believe she's going to find her way to the real thing. Watching you today. Watching both of you. I believe it more, not less. She kept the bracelet extended, patient, immovable. The bracelet doesn't belong to a lie. It belongs to a woman who is trying to get to the truth. That's you. Lily took it slowly. She held it without putting it on, just held it in her palm. Dorothy leaned back. Now, she said, we're going to eat sweet potato pie and I'm going to be irritated with you for a while, which I'm entitled to, and then we're going to be fine. That's how this works in this family. How long is a while? Lily asked. Through dinner, Dorothy said. I'm efficient with my irritation. Lily laughed, real, wet, half-wrecked. Okay, she said. Dorothy stood more slowly than she'd sat and moved toward the kitchen. At the door, she stopped and looked back at Everett. You can help me with the pie, she said, in a tone that made clear this was not optional. He followed her into the kitchen. It was a small, warm room with yellow curtains and a countertop that had seen decades of use. The pie was cooling on a wire rack near the window, golden brown, real. Dorothy moved to the cabinet and began producing plates with the purposeful efficiency of someone who had been feeding people her whole life. She doesn't know what you have, does she? Dorothy said. Not a question. He stilled slightly. I'm not sure what you mean, he said, because he wanted to understand what she knew before he confirmed anything. I do some reading, Dorothy said. I'm old, not disconnected. When Lily started texting me about a man named Everett, I looked up what I could. There are not many Everetts who do international investments and have offices in New York and are 32 years old. She handed him a plate. Put the forks out. Top drawer. He opened the top drawer, found the forks. She doesn't know, he confirmed. Why not? He thought about how to say it. Because the first time we talked, we weren't the kind of people where it was relevant. And then it kept not being relevant because she was talking to me, not to the idea of me. He paused. I've had people talk to the idea of me. It's not the same. Dorothy looked at him steadily. That's a real answer, she said. You asked a real question. She turned back to the pie, began cutting it with a calm, practiced hand. She works very hard, she said. She always has. She doesn't think she's allowed to want things for herself without earning them first. I don't know if I did that to her, or if it was her father, or just the way she's built, but it's in her. She plated a slice. When you tell her, she's going to feel like the ground moved. I know, he said. Are you planning to tell her soon? He set the forks on the small kitchen table. I'm going to tell her, he said. I'm working out the when. Dorothy made a sound, not quite disapproval, not quite acceptance. Don't let working out the when become a permanent condition, she said. That's what I said about figuring. I heard you, he said. Good. She handed him a plate with a slice of pie. This is for Lily. Take it to her. He took the plate and went back to the front room. Lily was sitting on the couch with her feet tucked up and the bracelet in her hand, turning it in that slow, considering way. She looked up when he came in, something open in her face, the post-cry openness where all the guardrails had come down briefly and everything was closer to the surface. He handed her the pie. She looked at it. She cuts it too big, she said. She does, he said. She always has. She says you can't properly taste something in a small piece. Lily looked at the plate. She used to make this when I had a hard week, just appear with this pie. I don't know how she knew. She always knew. He sat down beside her, not on the opposite end of the couch. In the middle, close enough that the conversation didn't require any effort. She was still looking at the pie. You did it, he said. We did it, she said. You did the hard part, he said. I just sat there. You sat there in a very load-bearing way, she said. He smiled at that. She glanced at him sideways and something shifted in her expression. Something that had been building and was now very close to the surface. and she seemed to decide something, sitting there with the pie in her lap and the bracelet in her hand. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You've asked me a lot of insane things," he said. "Apparently that's our dynamic." "What is this?" she said. She said it simply, looking at him directly, without hedging or preambulation, in the way she had of saying the real thing when she'd decided to say it. "What are we doing?" "Because I drove to an airport to meet you, and I already knew your coffee order, and I keep telling you things I haven't told anyone, and I don't know what category to put that in." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the afternoon had gotten darker, the gray sky dropping lower. Through the yellow curtains of the kitchen, they could hear Dorothy moving around. A cabinet, the clinking of something set on a counter, the small ordinary sounds of someone else's home. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I think not knowing doesn't mean nothing." She looked at him. "That's a complicated sentence." "I've been sitting with this for 3 weeks," he said. "I've got a lot of complicated sentences." He turned toward her slightly. "I know that you are one of the first people in a very long time who I think about when nothing's wrong. I know that coming to Memphis felt like, not a duty. It felt like something I wanted to do. And I know that those things add up to something, but I haven't let myself get there yet because I have a daughter and a complicated life, and He stopped. "I got very used to being careful." "I know about careful," she said quietly. "I know you do," he said. "I think that's part of it." She looked down at the bracelet in her hand, turned it once. "I'm scared," she said. "I want to be honest about that. I'm not scared of you specifically. I'm scared of... I've been alone long enough that I've gotten used to it. The shape of a life by yourself. You stop bumping into the empty spaces because you've arranged everything around them." She looked up. "I don't want to arrange everything around the empty spaces forever." He looked at her for a long moment. "Neither do I," he said. It was a quiet thing to say. No performance in it. Just the truth, placed there the way Dorothy had said talk. The way Lily had said, "I'm scared." Simply, without decoration. Because decoration would have made it less. Lily held his gaze for a moment and then looked away, at the room, at the photographs on the shelf, at the quilt on the arm of the chair. She took a slow breath and let it out. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Dorothy came back from the kitchen with 2 more plates and her own slice of pie and settled into her armchair with the satisfaction of someone who had conducted a difficult day correctly. She looked between them with her clear eyes and then focused on her pie with the diplomatic attention of someone giving 2 people a moment. "This is very good," Everett said. "I know," Dorothy said. "The sweet potato and the... Is there cardamom?" Dorothy looked at him with an expression that had upgraded from interested to something more. "1/4 teaspoon," she said. "Most people don't get that." "Lily said you taught her to cook," he said. "You have a good palate." Dorothy pointed her fork at him. "I like him," she told Lily. "I know," Lily said. "That's the problem." "It's not a problem," Dorothy said firmly. "It's a start." She took another bite of pie with great finality. "That's different." They stayed through dinner. Dorothy made chicken and rice, simple, exactly right. The kind of food that didn't try to be impressive and achieved something better. They ate at the small kitchen table and Dorothy told stories about Lily as a child, with the particular delight of grandmothers, who had been storing these stories for years waiting for the right audience. Lily buried her face in her hands during the one about the school talent show. Everett laughed. Genuinely, not politely. And Dorothy watched him laugh and nodded to herself like something had been confirmed. On the drive back to the airport, Lily was quiet for a while. Comfortable quiet, not the loaded kind. The city moved past the windows in the dark. Small commercial strips, residential streets, old trees. "She's going to be okay," Lily said eventually. "She was already okay," he said. "She just needed you to come tell her the truth." Lily nodded. "She liked you." "She liked that I knew about the cardamom," he said. "She liked that you laughed at the talent show story," Lily said. "She said people who laugh genuinely at things are safe to be around. She's been saying that since I was a kid." He watched the road. "She's right," he said. Lily turned her head to look at him. In the dark car, in the moving light of passing streets, she looked different than she had every other time. Quieter, not in an absence way, but in a full way. like she'd set something down and hadn't picked it back up. "You're going to tell me something," she said. "At some point. Something you haven't told me yet." He kept his eyes on the road. "Why do you think that?" "Because your grandmother, Dorothy, said something to you in the kitchen," she said, "and you came out looking like a man who had just been given a deadline." He was quiet for a moment. "She's perceptive," he said. "She's Dot," Lily said. "Same thing." He took the turn toward the airport. The road opened up. "Yes," he said finally. "There's something I need to tell you when we're back in New York, properly." She looked at him. "Is it bad?" He thought about it honestly. "I don't think so," he said. "I think it's just significant, and I want to say it right." She held his gaze for a second, then faced forward. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "I've trusted you since an airport in Chicago," she said. "I think I can trust you with a significant thing in New York." He said nothing to that, just drove. But he felt, for the first time in a long time, like a man moving towards something instead of maintaining a careful, well-managed distance from it. And the feeling was uncomfortable in the way of things that were true. Not pleasant, not unpleasant, just real. Real. And insisting on itself, and not interested in being filed away in the category with no label. He let it insist. For once, he let it insist. He told her on a Sunday. Not because Sunday was planned. He'd had a different plan. A dinner, something with enough formality to signal that what he was about to say mattered. Enough neutral ground that she wouldn't feel ambushed in a space she cared about. He'd thought about it for 2 weeks since Memphis, running through versions of the conversation the way he ran through projections, looking for the approach with the best outcome probability. Marcus had noticed the distraction and commented on it exactly once, and Everett had looked at him with an expression that communicated the subject was not open for consultation, and Marcus had returned to his laptop and not mentioned it again. But the dinner plan didn't happen, because on the Sunday 2 weeks after Memphis, Lily called him at 11 in the morning and said, "I need to not be in my apartment today. It's making me insane. Sophie's with her aunt, right? Do you want to do something completely ordinary and not discuss it in advance?" He said yes without thinking about it. She showed up at his building 40 minutes later in jeans and an old gray sweater with a small paint stain on the left cuff that she said came from a previous apartment and not any actual artistic talent. He buzzed her up, and when she came through the door, she looked at the apartment and went very still. He watched her take it in. The apartment was large, not ostentatiously so, but large in the way of a place that had been chosen by someone who could choose without restriction. High ceilings, wide windows looking over the park. Good furniture, not showy, but the kind of furniture that communicated quality without announcing it. Art on the walls that was not decorative in a generic sense, actually chosen, actually placed with intention. One wall in the living room was floor-to-ceiling books, organized not by color or visual effect, but by category and author, because the books were for reading. Lily stood in the entryway and looked at all of it. "Everett," she said, slowly. "Yes," he said. "This is a very large apartment," she said. "It is," he said. She turned to look at him. Something was already shifting in her expression. The same expression she'd had in Dorothy's kitchen when she'd told him he was going to say something he hadn't said yet, assembling the picture from pieces she'd had for a while but hadn't arranged. "This is not a finance person's apartment," she said. "I mean, it is, but it isn't." She looked at the wall of books, at the windows, back at him. "Marcus," she said, "your assistant, Marcus. Waitstaff at Arlo's don't have assistants. Investment people sometimes have assistants, but not usually the kind who get copied on." She stopped. "You sent me a calendar invite for Memphis from a domain. The domain wasn't a personal email." "No," he said. "It wasn't." "Hawthorne Capital," she said, quietly, testing the words. He was still. "I looked it up 2 weeks ago," she said. I wasn't snooping. I was curious about the domain, and then I looked it up, and then I found a profile in a financial publication from 18 months ago, and there was a photograph." She paused. "I've been waiting for you to tell me since Memphis." He exhaled slowly. "Lily." How much? She said. She said it directly, without anger but without softness either. She wanted the real number. She wanted the full ground she was standing on. He told her. She looked at him for a long moment after he said it, long enough that the silence had weight and texture. Then she walked fully into the apartment and sat down on the couch and put her hands on her knees and stared at the coffee table. Okay, she said. Okay? He sat down across from her, not beside her, because this needed some distance to breathe. I should have told you earlier, he said. I know that. I want to explain why I didn't, but I also want to be clear that I'm not asking you to accept the explanation as an excuse. Go ahead, she said. I don't tell people early, he said. Not because I'm ashamed of it, or because I think it's something to hide, but because the moment it's information someone has, it changes what they see. The number gets between me and whoever I'm talking to. Even people who aren't trying to let it affect them. It does. You start calculating, even unconsciously, what it means, what it could mean, what I might be able to do. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. With you, I didn't want that. I wanted you to know me first, the way you'd been knowing me. And then I kept not saying it because the longer I waited, the more I knew it was going to be a conversation, and I kept trying to find the right way in. She was quiet. You're not wrong that it changes things, she said finally. I'm sitting here and I can feel it changing things, and I don't want it to. She pressed her hands flat on her knees. I'm aware that that's not your fault, but it's a lot to sit with. The gap between what I thought I knew and what I know now. The gap isn't in me, he said. I'm the same person. I know, she said. I know that up here. She touched her temple. It's just taking a minute to get to the rest of me. He waited. She got up from the couch and walked to the windows, looking out over the park. The Sunday light was coming through at a low angle, laying long across the floor. She stood in it with her arms crossed, not defensively, more like she was holding herself steady. When I was 19, she said, there was a boy in Memphis. His family had money. Not your kind of money, but relative to where I was from, significant. We dated for about 4 months, and every time we were together in public, I was aware of it. The way his friends looked at me, the way I looked at things in restaurants and thought about what they cost before I ordered, the way I was always slightly performing like I was casual and comfortable and belonged there. She turned slightly from the window. I don't want to do that with you. I've been not doing that with you because I didn't know, and it felt like just talking to a person. I don't want to lose that. You don't have to lose it, he said. It's hard to unknow something, she said. I know, he said. But you've been talking to me for weeks. You know what I think about and what I avoid thinking about and what makes me laugh and what I'm scared of. That didn't change this morning. He paused. The number is a fact about my life. It's not the most important fact. She looked at him from the window. What is the most important fact? He thought about it. That I have a 5-year-old who needs me to be present and not just functional, he said. That I've spent 4 years inside a life I built specifically to be manageable, and I've been running out of reasons to think that's enough. That I met a woman in an airport who asked me to do something crazy, and I said yes because it was the first thing in a long time that felt like it mattered, and I haven't been able to explain that fully to myself since. He looked at her steadily. Those are the important facts. She held his gaze from the window. Something in her face was working through something. I'm a waitress, she said. I live in a 400-square-foot apartment in Queens. My savings account would fund about 4 months of your car insurance. I don't have a car, he said. She made a sound that wanted to be a laugh and wasn't quite ready. You know what I mean. I know what you mean, he said. And I need you to hear me say that none of that is a variable I'm calculating. Not because I'm trying to be noble about it, because it genuinely isn't a factor. The person I want to spend time with is the person who practiced my coffee order and texted me about a sweet potato puree and drove to Memphis to tell her grandmother the truth when she was scared. The amount in my portfolio has nothing to do with any of that. She was quiet for a long time. Can I be upset for a little while? She said finally. Not at you exactly, just at the situation. That there's this whole layer I didn't know about, and I have to figure out where to put it. Yes, he said. Take whatever time you need. And can I still be here? She said. In this very large apartment. While I figure it out. Something in him settled. Of course, he said. She turned back to the window. He let the silence be what it was, and not empty, not waiting for anything, just space for her to move around in. Outside, the park was doing its Sunday things. Joggers, dog walkers, a family with a stroller navigating the path near the fountain. The city, indifferent and continuous, doing what it always did. After a while, she said without turning around, "Your daughter knew." "Sophie," he said. "Yes." "She called you Daddy in front of my grandmother," Lily said. "She caught herself and called you James after, but she said Daddy first, and you both just absorbed it and kept going." She paused. I thought about that afterward. She didn't panic. She was 5 and she just adapted. She finally turned from the window. "How did you raise a child that steady?" "I didn't," he said honestly. "She came that way. I think it's Claire in her. Claire could recalibrate mid-fall." Lily crossed back to the couch and sat down. Not across from him this time, beside him, close to the middle, in the way she'd sat on Dorothy's couch in Memphis. Close enough that distance wasn't a factor. "Tell me one thing," she said, "that you've never told anyone. Not because I need leverage or anything like that, because I just told you something about a 19-year-old boy in Memphis that I have never said out loud to another human being, and I think it would help even the ground a little." He looked at the wall of books, at the park out the window, at his own hands. "I talk to Claire sometimes," he said. I don't think I'm actually communicating anything, but at night, if Sophie has had a hard day or done something remarkable, I just say it out loud in the apartment. Just, 'Sophie did this thing today.' You would have had a strong opinion about it." He stopped. "I don't know if that's grief or just habit. I do it anyway." Lily was very still beside him. "I think that's love," she said. "Not grief, or maybe both. But I think that's just love, not having anywhere to go and finding the nearest route anyway." He didn't answer that. It hit somewhere he wasn't prepared for, and he let it sit. Her hand moved on the cushion between them, not reaching for his, just moving there, present, close. He looked at it. She was looking at the books. "Okay," she said. "I think I'm done being upset at the situation." That was fast, he said. "I'm efficient with my feelings," she said. "Dot always says it runs in the family." A pause. She said it about irritation, but I think it applies generally. Something settled between them. Not resolution, not neatness, just the particular quality of two people who had said the hard thing and were still in the same room. "Show me the books," she said. He looked at her. "What?" "The wall. You organized it yourself, right? Not a decorator." "Yes," he said. "Then show me," she said. "I want to see what you kept." They spent 2 hours in the apartment that Sunday, Lily moving along the bookshelf with her hands clasped behind her back, pulling things out and reading the first page, asking questions, setting them back. She found his section of architecture books and said, "You researched being my husband." He said that wasn't entirely untrue. She found a shelf of children's books, Sophie's mostly, but a few that were clearly his, older editions, the kind you kept because you'd had them as a child. And she was quiet for a moment looking at them. She found the photograph on the side table. He hadn't put it away, the one of Claire that he kept there, Claire laughing, outdoors, squinting into the sun. Lily looked at it for a moment without touching it. "She's beautiful," she said. "Yes," he said. "She looks like she was hard to keep up with," she said. "Constantly," he said. Lily set the photograph back carefully, in the exact position it had been. She looked at him once, brief, acknowledging something, and moved on to the next shelf. He made lunch. Nothing impressive, a frittata with whatever was in the refrigerator, which turned out to be good because a frittata rewarded improvisation, and he had enough for it. Lily sat at the kitchen island and watched him cook with the particular attention she paid to food, occasionally asking questions about technique that he answered honestly, including the part where he admitted he'd only learned to cook after Claire died because nobody was going to do it otherwise. "What was the first thing you made?" she said. "Scrambled eggs," he said. "They were terrible." "How terrible?" "Sophie called them wrong eggs for 6 months," he said. Every time we had eggs that weren't wrong eggs, she called them good eggs to differentiate. Lily rested her chin on her hand. And now? Now I can make a decent frittata, he said. It took 3 years. That's not a small thing, she said. Learning to cook for a child when you don't know how to cook. He transferred the frittata to a plate and set it on the island. It was the practical thing, he said. It was the loving thing, she said. You can call it practical if that's easier. He looked at her across the island for a moment. You do that too, he said. What? Say the thing I'm trying not to think about, he said. She smiled at that. Small, private, like she was pleased that he'd noticed, like she'd been waiting to throw his own words back at him. They ate at the island because the dining table felt formal for a Sunday in sweaters. She told him about a cook at Arlo's who had quit that week in spectacular fashion in the middle of a dinner service by walking out of the kitchen without a word and leaving a spatula in the middle of the pass, which had caused a chain reaction of mild chaos that Lily described in detail with the slightly grim humor of someone who had survived it. Did dinner service recover? He asked. We improvised, she said. The sous chef stepped up and I handled 3 tables' orders from memory because the system went down simultaneously, because that's how those nights go. Every catastrophe brings a friend. What did you do with the spatula? He said. It's still there, she said. Nobody's moved it. It's become a kind of memorial. He laughed. She watched him laugh and did the thing she sometimes did, that slight expression, like she was adding something to an ongoing calculation, like the laugh was data. What? He said. Nothing, she said. You laugh and your whole face changes. You have a very managed face most of the time. Occupational, he said. I know, she said. I like when it goes away. He looked at her for a moment. She looked back, clear-eyed, not hiding anything. This was the version of Lily he'd been getting for weeks. The one without the guard up. The one who said the thing and meant it, and didn't retreat from it afterward. He said, I need to tell you something else. Her expression shifted slightly. Alert, not afraid. Okay, she said. Sophie asked me 3 weeks ago if you were my girlfriend, he said. Lily went very still. I said we were friends, he said. She pointed out that I don't have friends in the way I have you. She was right. He set his fork down. This isn't me asking you to define something right now. I know you have things to think about, and I just dropped a significant amount of information on you this morning, and you're still processing. But I want to be honest that what I said in Dorothy's living room, that I don't know yet, but not knowing doesn't mean nothing. I know more than I did then. She was watching him carefully. What do you know? She said. That I'd like there to be more Sundays, he said, like this one, where we don't plan it and it just works. And I'd like to introduce you to Sophie properly, not as an airport stranger, which she already sees through because she sees through everything. He paused. And I'd like to be the person you call when you need to not be in your apartment. Lily held his gaze for what felt like a long time, but was probably 10 seconds. You introduced me to Sophie in Chicago, she said. She called you Daddy, and then called you James, and told you your flight was delayed. That was a different kind of introduction, he said. I know, she said. I liked her immediately. She liked you immediately, he said. She's been asking about the jellyfish research. The corner of Lily's mouth moved. I did the research, she said. I told you, the dream about the stingray. She would love that, he said. Lily looked at her plate, at the frittata, at the island counter, at the afternoon light that had shifted while they weren't paying attention. She did the thing where she held herself still and thought through something fully before she said it, which he had learned was not hesitation, but how she respected her own thinking. I'm scared, she said. I said that in Memphis, and it's still true. She looked up. Not of you. Not even of the money, now that it's out in the open. I'm scared of... I've been on my own for a long time, taking care of myself, not needing anyone to... She stopped. I'm scared I'll get used to you, and Sophie, and then something will happen and I'll have to figure out how to unget used to it. He was quiet for a moment. That's a reasonable thing to be scared of, he said. I'm scared of the same thing, from the other direction. Losing someone again, she said. Letting someone in knowing what it costs when you lose them, he said. Yes. They sat with that. I think, Lily said carefully, that being scared of the same thing from different directions might mean we'd be paying attention to it. You can't ignore a thing you're both watching. He looked at her. That's either very wise or a very generous interpretation. She looked at him. Isn't that what you said to me about cowardice and love? Yes, he said. Maybe both, she said. Like you said. He held her gaze. She held his. The Sunday light continued its slow movement across the kitchen floor, unhurried, doing what light did when nobody was asking it to do anything else. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a resolution or a defined thing with a start date and a title. It was two people deciding at the same time in the same direction, which was messier and more real than any cleaner version would have been. The following Saturday, Sophie came home from her aunt's in the early evening, trailing her small rolling bag and the particular energy of a child who had been loved and entertained for 2 days, and was simultaneously happy to be home and processing how tired she was. She came through the door and found Lily sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with 3 of Sophie's picture books open around her and an expression of genuine absorption in whichever one she was currently reading. Sophie stopped in the doorway of the living room. Lily looked up. They looked at each other. You're reading my books, Sophie said. I am, Lily said. Your dad said it was okay. This one is very good. She held up the book, a well-worn edition about a dog that wanted to be an astronaut. The dog's problem-solving approach is innovative. Sophie came fully into the room, dragging her rolling bag, and stood over the open books with an evaluating expression. That's my favorite, she said, looking at the dog book. I can see why, Lily said. The part where he builds the rocket out of recycled materials is scientifically questionable, but emotionally very satisfying. Sophie sat down on the floor, cross-legged, cross-legged, across from Lily. She looked at her with the direct, considering gaze that she'd had since birth, and that sometimes caused adults to become unexpectedly honest. Are you Dad's girlfriend? She said. Sophie, Everett said from the kitchen doorway. What? Sophie said. Lily looked at Sophie steadily. We're figuring that out, she said, but I'm here, and I'm planning to be around, and I think that's the part that matters right now. Sophie considered this. That's more honest than most adults, she said. I try, Lily said. Did you research the jellyfish? Sophie said. I did, Lily said. Sit down. I'll tell you what I found. Sophie sat down, fully, decisively, with the commitment of someone who had made a decision. Lily opened the book to a page near the middle, and they bent over it together, Sophie pointing at things and Lily explaining them, and Everett stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his daughter and this woman on the floor with his daughter's books, their heads close together, and felt something so clear and so sharp that he had to look away from it briefly. He went back to the kitchen, stirred something on the stove that didn't need stirring, took a breath. He heard Sophie say something from the living room that made Lily laugh, the real laugh, the one that changed her face. He put the spoon down. Pat called Lily the following week. Lily told Everett about it afterwards, standing in his kitchen after dinner, 3 weeks into a pattern that had formed without anyone formally establishing it. Dinner on Wednesdays, Sundays variable, texts in the space between. She called to ask about you, Lily said. What did she want to know? Everything, Lily said. She'd been sitting on questions since the airport. She wanted to know who you were, what you did, whether I knew what I was getting into. She paused. I told her the full version, including Hawthorne Capital. How did that go? He said. She was quiet for about 45 seconds, Lily said, which is a long time for my mother. Then she said, Lily Marie, are you telling me you stopped a billionaire in an airport and asked him to pretend to be your husband? What did you say? I said yes, Lily said, and she said, did it work? And I said yes. And she said, I raised you right after all. Everett stared at her. Your mother said that? Pat contains multitudes, Lily said. He shook his head. Then he laughed and she laughed, and it was the kind of moment that didn't announce itself but would be remembered anyway. The harder moment came the following Sunday. They were walking in the park. He and Lily and Sophie, who had decided that this was an acceptable use of the afternoon and had structured the walk around a list of things she wanted to show Lily, including a specific tree she'd named Gerald and a fountain where she claimed a pigeon had once looked at her with intent, which was a phrase she appeared to have overheard somewhere and adopted permanently. Sophie was ahead of them on the path, conducting her tour with the authority of a person who owned the park through familiarity, if not legal title. Lily was walking beside Everett and they were talking, the way they always talked, about everything and nothing in the layered, easy way that had become their register. Then Sophie turned around and waited for them to catch up, and when they reached her, she looked between them with her serious dark eyes and said without preamble, "Can I tell people you're together?" Lily and Everett both went briefly quiet. "Because Mia at school asked me if my dad had a girlfriend," Sophie continued, "and I didn't know what to say, and I don't like not knowing what to say." Lily looked at Everett. Everett looked at Lily. "Yes," Lily said. She said it first before he could, and she said it without visible calculation, just a clean, clear answer. "You can tell people we're together." Sophie's expression didn't change dramatically. She just nodded once, satisfied, like a fact had been established. "Okay," she said. "Gerald's over here." And she walked on. Lily watched her go. "Too fast?" she said quietly to Everett. "No," he said. She glanced at him. He was watching Sophie navigate around a route in the path. "You're sure?" she said. "I've been watching you for 2 months," he said. "I'm sure." He paused. "Are you?" She looked at the park, at Sophie, who was now introducing Gerald the tree to an imaginary companion with what appeared to be genuine ceremony, at the path ahead, at the light in the late afternoon, that tired yellow quality that she had come to associate with a certain airport terminal, a certain collision, a certain question she'd asked a man she didn't know. "Yes," she said. The words settled between them without requiring anything more. Sophie called back from Gerald's tree, "Lily, he's very tall. I think you'll like him." Lily walked forward. Everett followed. The trouble started, as trouble often did when things were going well enough that there was something to lose. Marcus came to him on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the park, with the particular expression he wore when he had information that complicated things, and had been thinking about how to present it. He set a printed article on Everett's desk, a piece from a financial news site, short, gossipy in the way of that particular genre of business press, with a photograph. The photograph was from a restaurant, taken from a distance, the kind of photograph that was technically in a public place and therefore technically acceptable and still felt like an intrusion. It was Everett at a corner table. Beside him, clearly mid-conversation, was Lily. The caption read, "Hawthorne Capital's reclusive founder spotted with unidentified woman. Sources suggest frequent sightings in recent weeks." He read it twice. "How wide did this circulate?" he said. "Enough," Marcus said. "The comments are already making guesses. Some of them are correct about who she is." He set the article down. "Did she see it?" "I don't know," Marcus said. He picked up his phone. There was already a text from Lily, sent 40 minutes ago, that he'd missed during a call. "Hey, did you see something about... I got sent something by a coworker. Call me when you can." He called immediately. She picked up on the second ring. "Okay," she said. Her voice was carefully even. "So there's an article." "I know," he said. "I just saw it. With a photo of me that I didn't consent to," she said, "that someone apparently took through a restaurant window." A pause. "I knew this was a thing. I knew your life had visibility. I thought I was prepared for it." Another pause. "I'm less prepared than I thought." He closed his office door shut. "Lily, I'm not ending this," she said quickly, clearly. "I need to say that first so we don't spend time on that. This isn't me backing out. But I want to be honest that I'm standing in the break room at work having a moment about a photograph of me in a financial gossip column, and I need a second to breathe." "Take the second," he said. She took it. "Okay," she said. I'm okay. It's just weird. I'm a weird amount of public right now for someone who was a private citizen last week. I should have talked to you about this sooner," he said. "The visibility. What it looks like when the press pays attention to me. I should have given you more information before it was information you needed. Yes, she said, straightforward, not cruel. You should have. I'm sorry, he said. A pause. Accepted, she said. Not easily, but actually. What do we do about it? Nothing, he said. The best response to this kind of thing is no response. It disappears faster without fuel. He paused. But if you want, I can have someone talk to. There are ways to manage. No, she said. No managing. I don't want to become someone who manages their public image. That's not me. Okay, he said. I just want it to go away, she said. It will, he said. In 3 days, something more interesting will happen and nobody will remember. You sound like you've done this before, she said. Unfortunately, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Everett? Yes. The photograph was taken through a restaurant window, she said, which means someone was watching closely enough to get a clear shot, which means this is the kind of thing that could happen again and again. She paused. I need to know if that's the life. Not as a deal breaker, as information. I just need to actually know what I'm choosing. He leaned back in his chair. Outside his office window, the city was mid-morning, busy, indifferent, and enormous. He'd been in this office for 6 years. He'd sat in this chair and made hundreds of decisions, taken dozens of calls, built something from very little into something very large, and he had never in 6 years been more careful about the truth of an answer than he was in this moment. It happens, he said. Not constantly, but it happens. You'd develop a sense for when it was more likely. You'd learn which restaurants, which situations. Marcus helps navigate it. But yes, there will be other photographs, other moments where your privacy and mine are somebody else's news for 24 hours. He paused. It's manageable, but it's real, and I don't want to minimize it. Silence. Okay, she said. That's what I needed, the honest version. Always, he said. I know, she said, and then quieter. That's actually why I'm still here. You know that. He didn't say anything for a moment. The morning light was coming through his office windows at a low angle. I know, he said. After they hung up, he sat for a moment with the phone in his hand. Then he texted Sophie's aunt to confirm weekend pickup. Texted Marcus a single instruction about a meeting that needed rescheduling. Closed the financial article on his screen without reading the comments. He sat in the quiet of his office and thought about Lily in a break room in Midtown, having a moment about a photograph, and then pulling herself together with that quality she had, the reaching for okay quality, and calling him not to retreat but to get more information, to choose with full knowledge instead of half. He thought about what Dorothy had said. The bracelet doesn't belong to a lie. It belongs to a woman who is trying to get to the truth. He thought Lily Carter had been getting to the truth her whole life, just usually by herself, in break rooms and small apartments and airport terminals, without anyone to stand beside her while she did it. He intended to change that. Not perfectly. Not without complications or photographs through windows or conversations that required the honest version of things neither of them had prepared for. But genuinely. Consistently. In the way he'd decided things since the airport. Not because it was safe or manageable or fit the system, but because it was the right direction and he'd stopped pretending the system was enough. He opened a new text to Lily. Dinner Wednesday. Somewhere the windows face a wall. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. He stared at that for a second. We have a very specific romance, he typed. Yes, she wrote back. I like it. He put the phone in his pocket. Outside, the city continued its business. He let it. The restaurant photograph disappeared from the internet in roughly the time Everett had predicted. 3 days, a minor corporate scandal involving a different company, and nobody cared anymore about a blurry shot of a man having dinner. Lily went back to her regular shifts at Arlo's. The break room returned to its normal function. Life resumed its Wednesday and Sunday shape, plus the texts in between, plus the gradual, unannounced process of 2 separate lives beginning to lean toward each other without anyone formally declaring that this was what was happening. It was not seamless. Nothing real ever is. There was a Wednesday in December where Everett had to cancel dinner at the last minute, a call from a partner in Singapore that couldn't move, a cascading series of decisions that needed him specifically and immediately. The particular tyranny of being the person whose judgment was the point of the whole enterprise. He texted Lily at 6:15, already on the call, managing 2 screens, and her response was a single okay. That was technically fine and tonally not fine. And he knew it and couldn't do anything about it for 3 hours. When he finally called at 9:30, she answered on the 4th ring and said she was fine and she meant it mostly, but not completely. And they had a conversation that was slightly stilted in the way of people who were still learning each other's edges, where she said she understood his work and he said he should have given her more notice, and both of those things were true, and neither of them fully resolved the specific flatness in her voice that he'd caused. He showed up at her apartment the next morning before her shift with coffee, oat milk, no sugar, in a cup from the place on her block that she'd mentioned once 3 weeks ago. She opened the door, looked at him, looked at the coffee, and said, "You remembered the place." "I remember things," he said. She took the coffee. "You can't just fix things with coffee," she said. "I know," he said. "This is an apology that happens to involve coffee." She held the door open wider. He came in. Her apartment was exactly as he'd imagined from her descriptions. Small, 4th-floor walk-up, a kitchen that was functionally a counter, a living room that was a couch and a bookshelf, and a window that looked at the building across the street. But she'd done things with it. Plants on the windowsill, actual healthy ones, which he knew from the texts required specific care she actually provided. Cookbooks stacked on a small shelf, annotated, with sticky notes at certain pages. A corkboard near the kitchen covered in recipe cards and small drawings, and a photograph. He looked at it and realized with a slight jolt that the photograph was from the airport, taken by Sophie on his phone while nobody was paying attention, the 3 of them at the terminal table with the sweet potato fries. He hadn't known Sophie had taken that. He hadn't known Lily had it. He didn't say anything about it. But he noticed it. "The apartment is smaller than you expected," she said. Not defensively, just observing. "It looks like you," he said. She looked around it briefly as if checking whether that was true. "Yeah," she said. "I guess it does." "That's not a small thing," he said. "Most places don't look like the people who live in them." She sat on the couch with her coffee. He sat in the chair across from it. Her apartment had 1 chair, positioned at an angle that suggested it was mostly used for sitting alone and reading. "I know last night was work," she said. "I know you didn't choose it. I had planned the evening in my head and then it wasn't happening, and I sat here being more upset about it than I thought I should be." "You're allowed to be upset," he said. "I know I'm allowed," she said. "I just hate it when the feeling is bigger than the reason." She wrapped both hands around the cup. "It means I've gotten used to you, the having you thing, which is what I said I was scared of." "I know," he said. "I don't regret it," she said quickly. "The getting used to part. It's new territory." "For both of us," he said. She looked at him. "You canceled on people before? Before me?" "No," he said. "I didn't have people to cancel on." The honesty of that landed between them without ceremony. She nodded once, accepting it for what it was. "We'll figure out the work thing," she said. "I'll get better at the calls that can't move. You'll get better at the notice part." She paused. "It's just a learning curve." "It is," he said. "Okay," she said. "Apology accepted. You can stay for breakfast if you want, but I only have eggs, and I haven't made peace with the idea of you cooking in my kitchen. That feels like territory that needs to be established more slowly." "I'll make the eggs," he said. "Did you hear what I just said?" "You have 1 pan," he said, looking at the kitchen from the chair. "I'll use the 1 pan and it'll be fine." She stared at him. "How do you know I have 1 pan?" "Because you have a 1-pan kitchen," he said. "You have a 2-burner stove and about 8 inches of counter space. You can have 1 pan or you can have a kitchen, not both." She was quiet for a second. Then, "I have 2 pans." "Where's the second one?" A pause. "Under the couch," she said. "There's no room in the cabinet." He got up and made the eggs. She sat on the counter. There was nowhere else. And they talked while he cooked, the slight awkwardness of the night before dissolving in the ordinary way of the morning after, which was, he thought, one of the most underrated things in a relationship. The morning after a small fight, when you found out whether two people could return to each other without pretending the thing hadn't happened. They always named the thing. That had become, without discussion, one of their rules. The eggs were good. She admitted this grudgingly, which was its own form of warmth. January came, and with it something Lily didn't fully announce until it was already in motion. She'd been working on the menu for 2 years in her head. The small restaurant, the southern food with room to be interesting, the things she'd described to Everett on their first night over sweet potato fries. She'd been writing it down in a notebook that she kept in her canvas bag, adding to it on slow nights at Arlo's, refining it with the same focus she brought to everything she cared about. She showed it to Everett one Wednesday in January, sliding the notebook across the kitchen island without saying anything first, just putting it in front of him and watching him open it. He read through it slowly. She stood across the island and ate the dinner he'd made and tried to look like she wasn't monitoring his expression with extreme attention. He turned pages. He read the notes in the margins, her handwriting small and specific, precise about quantities and techniques and the reasoning behind combinations. He stopped on a page near the middle and read it twice. "This dish," he said, "the braised pork with the collard green puree and the pickled apple," she said. "Yes." "That's very specific," he said. "That's not a concept, that's a recipe." "I've made it 12 times," she said, adjusting. "At Arlo's?" "At home," she said, "in my one pan." He looked at her. She was trying to look casual and doing a middling job of it. "How long have you been working on this?" he said. "The menu specifically? About 8 months," she said. "The idea in general?" "Since I was 22 and working my first restaurant job and realized the chef had a 10-year-old menu and no interest in changing it, and I spent the entire shift thinking about what I'd do differently." He set the notebook down, folded his hands on top of it. She recognized the posture. It was the one he had when he was about to say something he'd already decided. "I want to invest," he said. She stared at him. "Not as a favor," he said immediately, reading her face. "As an investor. You'd have full creative control, full operational authority. I'd be a silent partner with a financial stake and no opinion on the menu unless you ask for one." "Everett, I know what you're going to say," he said. "I know it feels like the relationship and the money are getting tangled and you don't want to owe me anything and you've been doing things on your own terms your whole life and you don't want to start taking handouts now." He paused. "But this isn't a handout. I've read enough business plans to know the difference between a dream and a viable concept. And what's in this notebook is a viable concept. If someone I didn't know handed me this, I'd invest." She was very still. "But you do know me," she said. "Yes," he said, "which means I also know you'll work harder than anyone else in the building because it's yours. And you'll be meticulous about the food because you can't be any other way. And you'll take care of the staff because that's what you do. And those are exactly the qualities that make a restaurant survive past 2 years." He held her gaze. "This isn't me giving you something. This is me putting money into a thing I believe in." She looked at the notebook. "I need to think about it," she said. "Take all the time you need," he said. She took 3 weeks. She consulted Dorothy, who said, "Baby, if a man who knows money looks at your dream and says, 'I want in,' you say yes, and then you cook the best food of your life." She consulted Pat, who asked 17 specific questions about the terms, and then said the terms sounded reasonable and Lily should get a lawyer to review the partnership agreement, which she should have known already. She consulted herself, in the way she consulted herself, in her apartment in the early mornings, with the notebook open, thinking about what she actually wanted and what she was afraid of, and whether the fear was the useful kind that kept you careful or the useless kind that kept you stuck. She told Everett yes on a Sunday morning. She came to his apartment and set it standing in the entryway with her coat still on, before she'd even taken her shoes off, because she'd apparently decided on the subway and didn't want to wait any longer. "Yes," she said, "but I need the agreement to be real. Not a favor that looks like a contract, real terms, real expectations, real consequences if it doesn't work." "That's the only kind of agreement I make," he said. "And I want Dorothy to come when we open," she said. "Whenever that is. She comes, she has a table, she eats everything on the menu." "Obviously," he said. "And Sophie gets named on something," she said. "A dish or a section of the menu or something. She's the reason any of this started. He went very still for a moment. What do you mean? I stopped you because of how you listened to her, Lily said. If she'd been a different kind of kid, or if you'd been the kind of parent who talked over her, I'd have kept walking. The whole thing, the airport, Memphis, this, traces back to a 5-year-old and her pretzels. She looked at him steadily. She should know that someday, that she was the beginning. He looked at Lily for a long moment. His face did the thing it did when he was feeling something he hadn't organized yet. Okay, he said. His voice was slightly different than usual. Okay, she said. She finally took her coat off. Now, Sophie mentioned yesterday that you've been bribing her with television time in exchange for not telling me things. I want a full accounting. That's a gross mischaracterization of events, he said. She said she knows about the Singapore trip, Lily said. She was awake when she was supposed to be asleep, he said. She's always awake when she's supposed to be asleep, Lily said. You know this. I'm working on it, he said. Work faster, she said, and went into the kitchen to make coffee. And the apartment rearranged itself around her presence the way it had been doing for months, quietly, without announcement, the way spaces changed when the right person had been in them enough times. The proposal happened in March, and it was not, by any cinematic standard, a perfect moment. Sophie had a stomach bug, not a dramatic one, but persistent enough that Everett had canceled his Thursday and Friday to be home with her, doing the things a parent did when a child was sick. The flat ginger ale, the crackers, the thermometer every 4 hours, the specific vigilance of monitoring whether this was fine sick or doctor sick. Lily had come over Thursday evening with soup she'd made at home, in the 2 pans, carrying it in a pot in a canvas bag on the subway, because that was what she did. Sophie was on the couch under a blanket, pale and sorry for herself, when Lily arrived. Lily set the soup on the stove, came and sat beside Sophie, and put her hand on her forehead with the practiced ease of someone who had absorbed that gesture from Dorothy and carried it naturally. How's your stomach? She said. Bad, Sophie said. Everything is bad. Everything feels bad when your stomach hurts, Lily agreed. I made you soup. It has noodles shaped like stars because I thought that might help marginally. Sophie looked at her. Stars help, she confirmed. Lily tucked the blanket closer around her. Sophie leaned sideways and put her head against Lily's arm, with the complete and unconscious trust of a sick child who had decided this was where she wanted to be, and Lily went still for just a second. A full-body stillness, something moving through her face that she wasn't entirely controlling, and then she adjusted her arm slightly and let Sophie settle. Everett saw this from the kitchen doorway. He had been in the process of getting bowls from the cabinet. He stopped. He watched Lily sitting on the couch with his daughter, leaning against her arm, both of them watching something on the television in the low-lit apartment, Lily's hand resting lightly on Sophie's blanket. And he had the particular experience of understanding something he'd been approaching for months, but hadn't yet arrived at completely. He wasn't approaching it anymore. He went back to the kitchen. The ring was in the back of the drawer where he'd put it 3 weeks ago. A simple thing, not showy, chosen with some care, a thin gold band with a small inset stone that caught light without announcing itself. He'd bought it without a specific plan, which was unlike him, but he'd seen it and he'd known, and he'd put it in the drawer and told himself he'd figure out the right moment. He stood in the kitchen holding the box. From the living room, he could hear Lily saying something to Sophie, something quiet, narrative, maybe making up a story about the star-shaped noodles. Sophie laughed, low and tired, the kind of laugh a sick child produced when something was genuinely funny, but they didn't have full capacity. There was no right moment. There was only this one, real and imperfect, smelling like soup and ginger ale, with a sick child on the couch, and 2 pans in a canvas bag and a woman who had carried soup on the subway because that's what she did when someone she loved needed something. He walked back into the living room. Lily looked up. Sophie looked up. He didn't do the down-on-one-knee thing. The apartment was small. Sophie was on the couch. The execution would have been awkward. He just sat down on the coffee table in front of Lily, directly in front of her, and held out the box. She looked at it, then at him. Everett, she said quietly, the way she said it when she was feeling something too large to immediately navigate. I've been thinking about the right way to do this for 3 months, he said. I've been waiting for the right setting, the right speech, the right circumstances. And I just watched you settle a sick kid with star noodles and a story, and I thought, I can't wait for a better moment than this. This is the realest moment I have. Sophie, to her credit, made no sound. She was watching with enormous eyes from under her blanket, the television entirely forgotten. I don't have a speech, he said. I know you. I know how you are when you're scared and when you're certain and when you're figuring something out and when you've already figured it out. I know that you carry soup on subways and you keep menus in your head for years and you stop strangers in airports because when you love someone, you do whatever it takes. He paused. I know that Sophie calls you when something happens at school before she calls me sometimes, which she thinks I don't know. He looked at his daughter briefly. Sophie had the grace to look slightly sheepish. He looked back at Lily. And I know that I've spent 4 years building careful distance from anything that could matter too much, and you walked straight through every system I had without even trying, which is, honestly, kind of embarrassing professionally. Lily made a sound that was a laugh and a sob landing at the same time. I'm not perfect at this, he said. I'll cancel dinners sometimes. I'll get the notice wrong. I'll sometimes do that thing where I manage instead of feel, and you'll have to tell me to stop, and I'll need reminding. He held the box steady. But I'm here, completely. That part I'm sure of. She looked at the box, at him, at Sophie, who was watching with the focused attention of someone taking notes. Sophie, Lily said, did you know about this? He put it in the drawer 3 weeks ago, Sophie said. I found it when I was looking for batteries. Sophie, Everett said. I didn't tell anyone, she said with dignity. I gave it back. Lily looked at him. Her eyes were wet, doing nothing to hide it. This is the most you thing, she said. Proposing on a Thursday with a sick kid present because you decided the moment was right. Is that a no? He said. It's absolutely not a no, she said. She took the box, opened it herself, looked at the ring for a moment with her particular considering expression, the one that meant she was taking the real measure of a thing. Then she looked up at him. Put it on, she said. I want to see if you got the size right. I got the size right, he said. Prove it, she said. He took the ring from the box and put it on her finger. It fit. She looked at it on her hand, the ring, and beside it the slight trace line from where Dorothy's bracelet sat when she wore it. She turned her hand once. You got the size right, she said. I told you, he said. Sophie made a small sound from the couch. They both looked at her. She was crying very quietly, in the manner of a 6-year-old who had decided to have feelings and was somewhat surprised by the intensity of them. Hey, Lily said immediately, moving toward her. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Sophie said with great dignity and a running nose. I'm happy. Happy is a kind of crying. Lily sat beside her and pulled her into her side, blanket and all. Sophie pressed her face against Lily's shoulder. Mrs. Patterson said that, Sophie said, muffled. Mrs. Patterson is very wise, Lily said. Everett sat beside them both. Sophie was in the middle, which was correct, which was where she had always been at the center of everything that mattered in his life. He put his arm around both of them, his daughter and this woman, in this small apartment that had learned to hold all three of them. They stayed like that while the soup heated on the stove and the television played something none of them were watching and the March evening came down over the city outside. Sophie recovered from her stomach bug by the weekend. The engagement was not announced publicly for 6 weeks, by which point Lily had told Dorothy on a phone call that lasted an hour and 40 minutes, and Dorothy had cried, and then Lily had cried, and then Dorothy had said, I told you the bracelet belongs to a woman who is getting to the truth. And Lily said, you told me no such thing. And Dorothy said, I told you something like it. And Lily said, fair enough. Pat was told separately. Pat said, I'm going to need the full legal terms of any prenuptial arrangement reviewed by my attorney as a condition of my blessing. Then she paused and added, I'm very glad you found someone, Lily. I know I don't say that enough. It was for Pat an extraordinary amount of softness, and Lily recorded it in her memory in the category of things she would not bring up again but would never forget. The wedding was in September. Not September of that year, They waited a year because there was a restaurant to open first, because rushing things had never been their style. Because Lily said she wanted to do one enormous thing and then the other enormous thing, rather than both at once. Because she knew herself well enough to know she couldn't give either the attention it deserved if they were simultaneous. The restaurant opened in June. It was called 40 because Sophie had suggested it, and nobody had a better idea, and because it was exactly right, the specific span of time from which everything else had come. It seated 42 people on a good night, occupied the ground floor of a building in the West Village, had a menu that changed every 6 weeks based on what was good and what Lily was thinking about, and served Southern food with room to be interesting. The pickled apple and braised pork was on the opening menu. The first reservation went to Dorothy Mae Carter, who flew in from Memphis and occupied the corner table for 3 hours and ate everything they put in front of her and said to the server, "Tell the chef her grandmother sends her love, and also the biscuits need approximately 4 more minutes next time." Lily received this note in the kitchen, read it, and laughed so hard she had to hand the ticket to her sous chef. The reviews were good. Not unanimously. A critic from one publication called the menu confidently regional, which was meant as a mild slight, and which Lily printed out and put on the corkboard in her office next to the airport photograph, and a drawing Sophie had made of the restaurant's sign before it existed, in crayon, slightly lopsided, completely correct. The other reviews were kinder, and the one that mattered most, from someone who wrote specifically about new American regional cooking, said, "There is a specificity of care in every dish at 40 that suggests a chef who has been thinking about this food for a very long time. It shows." Lily read that one twice. Then she texted Everett. Someone noticed the thinking for a long time part. He wrote back, "I noticed it in an airport. They're slow." She sent him a period. He knew by now that this meant she found him both aggravating and exactly right. The wedding was on a Saturday in late September, which was the best weather New York offered. Clear and dry. The first of the real fall light, the kind of afternoon that made the city look like it was being generous. The venue was a small event space in Brooklyn with exposed brick walls and large windows and room enough for 65 people, which was everyone who mattered. Dorothy was in the front row with her reading glasses on her nose and a pale yellow dress that was the exact shade of her cardigan from the Memphis porch. Pat was beside her, upright as always, and managed to dab at her eyes once during the ceremony with the subtle economy of a woman who had strong feelings about public emotional displays and was having one anyway. Marcus was there, stone-faced and suspiciously moved, and later claimed at the reception that he had allergies. The ceremony was not long. Neither of them wanted long. They'd both said enough real things in small apartments and kitchens and cars going to airports to find a long ceremony slightly redundant. What they said to each other was what they'd been saying for a year, just formalized. "I see you, I choose you, I'm here." Lily walked in wearing the bracelet on her right wrist, where it sat alongside the engagement ring on her left. And she was not the kind of bride who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her hair was down, the same way it had been on the flight to Memphis. There was a moment, partway down the aisle, when she found Everett's face, and her expression did the thing it did. That particular settling, like something that had been figuring itself out, had finally arrived at an answer. He looked at her the way he looked at things he intended to keep. Sophie, 6 years old in a dress that she had selected herself, and that was slightly more elaborate than the occasion strictly required, stood at the front and held the rings with the seriousness of someone performing a critical operational function. When the officiant asked for the rings, she produced them with a precision that drew a small laugh from the room, and she looked pleased with this in a way she was trying to contain. When it was done, when the words were said and the rings were on and the room had done its thing, Sophie moved first before the kiss, before the officiant had finished, stepping between them with a solemnity that silenced any laughter. She looked at Lily. Lily looked at her. "Hi, Mom," Sophie said. She'd said it before, at home, quietly once, but this was the first time in front of everyone, in the deliberate way of someone who had decided something was real and was ready to say so publicly. The room went completely quiet in the way rooms did when something true had just been spoken into them. Lily put her hand on Sophie's face. She didn't trust her voice, so she didn't use it. She just held Sophie's face in her hands for a moment, and Sophie let her, and the whole room held very still. Everett watched his daughter with his wife's hands on her face and felt something that had no simple name. It was loss and grief and gratitude and joy and about a dozen other things that only existed simultaneously in the specific circumstances of loving people deeply enough that their happiness and your own had become the same thing. He had believed for 4 years that this was a category of feeling that was finished for him, that he'd used up his portion of it, that what remained was care and function and the love he had for Sophie, which was enormous and sufficient, and the thing he'd organized everything else around. He'd been wrong. He wasn't sorry about being wrong. The reception was loud and long, and the food, catered by 40 with Lily's sous chef managing the kitchen that night, was exceptional. Dorothy danced twice, once with Everett, which she initiated by simply appearing in front of him with her hand extended, and once with Sophie, who had very strong opinions about the proper execution of a two-step and communicated them clearly. Pat ate 3 plates of food, which was the most emotional anyone had ever seen her, and told Everett at one point during the evening that he was acceptable, which Lily later told him was the single warmest thing her mother had ever said to a member of their family. Somewhere near the end of the night, when the dancing had slowed and the room had gotten to the warm, slightly blurry stage of a good reception, Everett found himself standing near the windows with a glass of something he'd barely touched, watching. Lily was across the room talking to Dorothy, leaning down to catch something her grandmother was saying, laughing at whatever it was. Sophie was asleep in a chair in the corner, not in her bed, but the right kind of asleep, the kind that meant she'd had a good day and her body had finally called it. The room was full of people he was glad were in his life, and the city was visible through the windows, doing its indifferent, enormous thing outside. He thought about Gate 7 at Hargrove International, the yellow-tired light, a woman with coffee on her shirt, and a desperate expression and 30 seconds of the most honest ask anyone had ever made of him. He thought about Sophie eating pretzels and calling them basically air. He thought about Dorothy's hands on his, saying, "I know you will." He thought about a bracelet catching the light on a wrist, and soup on a subway, and a notebook full of menus, and a text that said goodnight, Everett, with a period at the end. He thought about the category with no label, the one where he'd put things he didn't know what to do with. The category was empty. He hadn't noticed exactly when it had emptied. That was the thing about real change. It rarely announced itself. It happened in the small, unmarked moments, the coffee orders remembered, and the conversations that went longer than planned, and the Sundays that became a pattern without anyone formalizing them. It happened in a break room in Midtown, and a kitchen in Memphis, and a living room floor with picture books. It accumulated quietly until one day you were standing at a window at your own wedding with an empty category where the unnamed things used to live, and you understood that they'd found their names at last. Lily looked up from across the room, found him, made a face that asked what he was doing standing alone at the window being pensive when there were people to talk to, which was a face he'd gotten to know very well. He lifted his glass slightly. She shook her head at him in the fond, exasperated way she had, the way that said, "You are a specific kind of ridiculous, and I have accepted this fully," and went back to Dorothy. He watched her go. He had read once, in something he no longer remembered the source of, that the most important decisions people made were usually not the ones they thought about the longest. They were the small, unguarded ones. The ones made quickly, from instinct, before the calculating part of the brain could weigh in and apply its systems. The ones that looked, in the moment, like they cost nothing. 40 minutes of kindness to a stranger. That was all it had cost. 40 minutes in an airport and a bag of pretzels and the willingness to say yes to something that made no particular sense. He had not been looking for any of this. Not the restaurant named for an interval of time, not the woman who carried soup on subways and menus in her head, not the version of his daughter who called someone mom in front of 65 people with the calm certainty of a child who knew her own mind. He had been standing at Gate 7 with a carry-on bag that had seen better days, waiting for a delayed flight, managing his life with the practiced efficiency of a man who had decided managing was enough. He had been wrong about that too. The thing about building walls was that they worked. That was the problem with them. They worked exactly as intended. They kept the difficult things out, and they kept you in. And after enough years, you stopped noticing the difference between safety and confinement. He had not known he was confined until a frightened woman with coffee on her shirt had looked at him with the specific desperation of someone who had run out of options, and something in him had recognized that feeling, and he had said yes. Not because it was reasonable, because she needed someone too, and he was there, and he was tired of the walls doing their job. He looked at Sophie asleep in the chair. She had grown in the year since the airport, not dramatically, but perceptibly, the way children grew when you were paying close attention. She would be 7 in the spring. She would be in first grade in the fall, then second, then third, and at each stage she would be both his daughter and her own complete person, the way she'd always been. And he would try his best to be present and adequate, and occasionally let her argue him into pretzels on metabolic grounds. He would tell her the story someday. Not all of it, not yet. But the part about the airport and the 40 minutes, that part she'd get eventually, because she was part of the reason it happened and she deserved to know. She'd roll her eyes, probably, at the romance of it. And then she'd think about it later, the way she thought about things, alone and thorough, and she'd decide what she made of it. He thought she'd be fine with it. He thought she'd understand it better than most adults would, because she'd been there, and because she was Sophie, and because she had always understood that kindness was not weakness, that saying yes to something that scared you was not the same as being reckless, that the best things rarely arrived with advance notice or reasonable logistics. She'd learned that from Claire. She'd reinforced it, this year, from Lily. He was, all things considered, a very lucky man, not because of the portfolio or the apartment or the view from his office window, because of the specific, improbable accumulation of choices, his and Lily's and Dorothy's and Sophie's, all of them made imperfectly, all of them made honestly, that had brought 65 people into a room in Brooklyn on a September evening to eat food from a restaurant named for the 40 minutes that started everything. Lily crossed the room toward him. She had the bracelet on her right wrist and her wedding ring on her left hand, and she was slightly flushed from the dancing, and her hair had come loose the way it had been loose on the flight to Memphis, and she looked exactly like herself, which was the thing he'd been falling for since the beginning. Not an idea of her, not a version of her, just this specific person, imperfect and honest, and always in the process of getting somewhere. "You're doing the pensive window thing," she said. "I'm enjoying the party," he said. "You're standing alone thinking about things," she said. "Which is fine, but your daughter is asleep in that chair, and if we don't move her, she'll wake up with a stiff neck, and it'll be my fault for not flagging it." "Sophie can sleep anywhere," he said. "She's 6, Lily said. "She needs the actual bed." He looked at Sophie, at Lily. "In a minute," he said. She followed his gaze out the window. The city was the city, a billion lights and no particular interest in being symbolic, just there, just doing its enormous continuous business. "What are you thinking about?" she said. 40 minutes, he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Me too," she said. She put her hand in his. Not dramatically, just put it there, warm and certain, the way she'd been doing for a year, without fanfare, without announcement, just present. He held it. Behind them, Sophie slept in her chair. Around them, the room held the last of the evening. Outside, the city went on, which it would do regardless, which was fine, which was one of the good things about cities. They were always there to come back to, always there to walk out into, always there on the other side of whatever happened between people in their rooms and kitchens and airports. He thought of what Dorothy had said, standing in her kitchen in Memphis, handing him a plate for Lily. She said every woman in this family carries love differently. She said the bracelet isn't about being perfect. It's about being present for the real thing when it comes. He had been present. That was all. That was the whole of it. He had been standing at gate 7 with a worn-out bag and a daughter eating pretzels, and he had been present enough to notice a woman in crisis and present enough to say yes, and present enough to mean it, and everything that came after, the bracelet and Memphis and Wednesday dinners and soup on a subway and a restaurant named 40 and a ring that fit. All of it had grown from that single act of paying attention. The greatest fortunes were always like that, not built, found, in the moments you almost walked past. He had not walked past. He did not intend to walk past anything, ever again. Sophie stirred in her chair, one eye opened. She looked at them at the window, their backs to the room, standing close. "Are you being sentimental?" she said. "Yes," Lily said. "Okay," Sophie said. "Can we go home?" "In a minute," they both said at the same time. Sophie closed her eye. The minutes stretched into several, in the way of minutes at the end of good days. Nobody moved to shorten it. Outside, the September night held steady, clear, and dry, the city enormous below, the lights going on in every direction, indifferent and radiant, the way cities always were. They went home.